Welcome back to the darker side of boxing, episode number 4 of the 3rd season of Darker Side of Boxing. And today's episode is about a familiar fighter from the 1970s by the name of Leon Spinks, also known as Leon Neon Spinks, or very rarely known as the Chicken Wing King, a story which we will include for the episode, and we'll tell you about why he got the name the Chicken Wing King. But this is all about the man, one of the Spinks brothers. We've already covered Michael for a career profile previously, but this is the darker side of boxing, and this is all about incidents and moments and good things, bad things, and everything that relates to true crime. This is our episode on Leon Neon Spinks. Very excited to talk about this man. Unfortunately, passed away within the last 12 months, suffered for many, many years, of course, because of illness, but you know, we can't not do something on Leon Spinks because he's got a hell of a story to tell.
He's got a hell of a story to tell, and he's got an incredible journey that happens very quickly, and then his life develops into something beyond what he ever thought it could be. It's almost like, as we were doing this, it just rings bells with Mitch Green, who's one of my favourite ever, and yours, Sean, Dark Side of Boxing episodes, and it's the same sort of era, isn't it? It's the same era. It's that same, society that they were brought up in, which we're going to go into. But the one thing I will say about Leon Spinks is no matter where we went for our research, whether it be articles, whether it be a book, whether it be anything else, documentaries, whatever's on there, everybody will say that Leon Spinks was a lovely guy. So whatever happens in this story, make your own assumptions, but the be all and end all of it, he was a nice guy. So it's nice again, we've sort of had a few of these few episodes so far where we've had guys that are actually quite nice deep down. So it makes a change this season at the minute. So I sort of hope that trend continues, but we'll see.
Now, as we do with all our Darker Side of Boxing episodes, we try and set some context to certain fighters' early beginnings, and this is no different. And it starts in 1955 when Kay Francis and Leon Spinks Sr. moved into a cramped apartment on the 8th floor of the Pruitt-Igoe housing projects in St. Louis, Missouri. 2 years after, Leon Spinks Jr. was born on July the 11th, 1953. They also had a 1-year-old daughter, Karen, and then had Michael a year later. Kay and Leon Sr. would soon divorce in 1957 due to him being a deadbeat husband and an even worse father. Kay was a very religious lady who went on to have another 4 children, Kenneth, Leyland, Eddie and Evan, with another man. Kay was left on her own to look after herself and all 7 of her children on just $150 monthly income. Food was scarce and dinners usually consisted of cornbread and peanut butter. Leon Jr. was a skinny, sickly kid who suffered with low blood pressure, asthma and the occasional blackouts. He recollects his nasty piece of shit father hanging him by his shirt from a nail in the wall and then beating him with an electrical cord across the face while telling him, "You'll never amount to anything." According to a 1978 interview with Leon Sr. in the Miami News, he said that incident never took place, saying that he only ever gave his son only 2 whippings. Once, when young Leon refused to fight back after being kicked by another boy, and a second time when Leon returned from a shopping trip having spent family funds on a pocket full of candy. His teacher, Charles Slate, from Vashon High School, clearly didn't feel comfortable around his dad, and he said, "I wouldn't mention his father's name for anything. I couldn't watch his face." When Leon Sr. left the family home, Kay used her faith as a coping mechanism. She would even send letters to the school head teacher, Cozy Marks, asking him to pray for her and her kids.
Well, if things weren't hard enough for Kay and her kids, being raised in the Pruitt-Igoe housing projects was tough. It was no ordinary housing disaster that was located a mile from the Gateway Arch in St. Louis, Missouri's iconic centerpiece, if no one knows, it's the Gateway Arch. From the day the ribbon was cut in 1954 to open the Pruitt-Igoe housing projects, it had been a lie. It had come from a promise direct from the St. Louis Housing Authority. Pruitt-Igoe was supposed to mark the end of the urban slum. The nearly identical 11-story glass and concrete constructions was supposed to replace the decaying houses and had become an eyesore. The ads for the Pruitt Igo presented that of a community, and it was described as bright new buildings with spacious grounds, indoor plumbing, electric lights, fresh plastered walls, and other convenience expected in the 20th century. But the developers had been skimping on materials from the start. Pruitt Igo was the model for other urban renewal projects in Baltimore, in Detroit, Chicago, Philadelphia, and Boston. But it was falling apart before the tenants had even had a chance to move in. Racial segregation was already prominent, but the project was flawed from the moment it began. Pruitt apartments were actually meant for the black residents and Igo apartments for the whites. So already they're segregating people. It wasn't long before many whites and the wealthier blacks left, leaving behind the poorest within the black community. North St. Louis offered its residents only two significant employers, the Brown Shoe Company and the General Motors plant, that turned out with the Caprice and the Impala station wagon and the Corvette. Both factories systematically shut black workers out of skilled trades and confined them with minimal jobs such as porters, sweepers, and material handlers. So, it was just never easy for any poor black guy, woman, kid to get out of this environment. Unemployment among the poor black community on the North St. Louis hovered at 19%, and by late 1960s, the area was overwhelmed with drug dealers, junkies, which left the apartments 2/3 empty.
Life in Pruitt Igo became so precarious that cops patrolling the area stopped answering emergency calls coming from the tenants. The gangs grew stronger and the murder rate in North St. Louis soared, soon doubling that of New York City and eclipsing that of the rest of the country. The press reported crime in Pruitt Igo as black versus black. A more accurate description may have been gangs versus anybody left. DeSoto boxer Jesse Davison remembers Pruitt Igo was a terrible place to live. No guys would come to fix the elevators because they were afraid. I lived on the 11th floor, but I didn't ride the elevators. I walked up the steps. You'd ride in the elevator, the lights would be broken. If you got stuck, you tried to climb out the top, but you didn't know what would be waiting. There'd be drug dealers on top of the elevator. You'd be afraid they'd shoot at you or urinate on you. Fellow boxer James Caldwell still remembers the dangers of playing basketball in Pruitt Igo, and he said some guy would walk up to a car and start shooting. We'd all scatter. As soon as the commotion was over, we'd go back and start playing ball again. John Crittenden, who grew up on the same block as the Spinks brothers, has his own memories, and he said, there were car thefts, there were homicides, there were robberies, crimes against the mailman, the insurance man. The insurance guys had to be escorted by police when they came to collect the premiums. It was crazy. When the police were called, they would wait on the main street until backup came, if any came at all. They were slow to respond to anything that happened in Pruitt Igo because they felt like victims themselves. They would be shot at. People would throw bottles down on their cars.
Well, the only survival tactic was to either join a gang or make it through boxing or music. And Crittenden said that Leon was a quiet kid. He kept himself to himself. He was bullied a lot. I was a little bit guilty of bullying him myself. He wouldn't stick up for himself. He was just a little snotty-nosed kid. He shied away from everybody. We took his lunch. We slapped him upside the head. We really did bully him. Michael also. They wouldn't fight back. They cried and ran away. That kind of stuff was going on. You were either with a gang or you weren't. It was just part of growing up in a Pruitt Igo estate. So Leon and Michael, they were targeted because they were considered weak. Mike found himself getting into a fair share of difficult situations, but it was his brother Leon who really struggled the most. He was actually mugged and beaten up on regular occurrences, and he actually got a nickname for himself that the bullies called him, and they called him the mess over because he was such an easy target. Kay and Michael said that Leon would come home bloody and he bruised almost every day at one point. And because Leon and Michael were often bullied, that was the moment they decided to try and toughen themselves up by joining the local boxing gym. Now, it was Leon who first attended the boxing gym, and when he returned home, he showed Michael some moves that he had learned from the gym, giving his brother, Mike, as Mike put it, an arse whipping. So the very next day, Michael decided to go to the gym with him, and from that moment, they never looked back. It was Jim Merle, who was the boxing coach in the local area, who was associated with the St. Louis gym program created to keep youngsters off the street. And he taught them the fundamentals of how to box in terms of using their speed, bobbing and weaving.
Jim Mill recalls they were in a bad situation and a bad element. It seemed they were always being picked on by individuals in the area, so when they were about 13 and 15, they came to Capri and asked me to teach them, and I did. From Capri, they moved on to the DeSoto gym, which was run by a real character, Kenny Lua, a white man, an ex-Marine who was a tough, no-nonsense, old-school kind of guy. He pushed all the kids hard, verbally insulting them to get more out of them, calling them chicken shits and freaks. He never let up until the workouts were over, running the 5-year-olds as hard as he did the teenagers. When one of his kids got knocked out, he'd send him back into the ring the next day, telling him it would toughen him up. Lua was one of the few white outsiders to dare enter the project, but he had an ace up his sleeve. Any gang member who touched him would have to deal with the 70 boxers he was teaching. He was known to yell out the driver's window as he parked near the Spinks' building, "Hey chicken shit, get out here freaks." Although Lua was tough on kids, he understood how hard it was for all the youngsters in the projects, and he said, "Pruitt-Igoe, that was a tough place. That was no life. I remember this one store burned down and all my kids put on £5-10 because they were going over there and eating all the food they could. They never had any food. You'd be riding by with your arm out the window and some kid would take the watch right off your hand. They never had nothing."
Steve Holly, the former president of the St. Louis Amateur Boxing Association, remembered how boxing helped the luckier kids from the Pruitt-Igoe housing projects on amateur boxing nights. And this is what he said. He said, "It wasn't uncommon for us to have well over 100 amateur boxing shows a year. The majority of the kids came from the projects like Leon and Michael. And when they came to the shows, we gave them $10, $15, $20 for dinner money. And that was a lot of money back then. A lot of the times they would save the money and take it home so they would have a little bit more money to share with their families." I mean, that's how bad it was. That's just incredible just hearing that. Also, he spoke of the success of the St. Louis amateur boxing program. He said back in those days, we had one of the strongest amateur programs in the country. Budweiser sponsored us. When the boxers wore those black jackets that said Budweiser Golden Gloves, it meant something. Around town, people knew that and said, "Hey, these guys, they're doing the do." It wasn't jealousy as much as it was respect. Leon was determined to be one of those kids that made it out of the projects. If not, so he could make a better life for himself, then he could prove his dad wrong, which was the other thing. And he even said to Sports Illustrated that my dad had gone around and told people I would never be anything. It hurt me. I've never forgotten it. I made up my mind that I was going to be somebody in this world, that whatever price I had to pay, I was going to succeed at something.
By winning his local matches, the programme provided a ticket to the outside world. Leon told BoxingTalk.com, "I saw that I could travel as long as I beat my opponent. It was my best escape, and it was my best way to get respect in the neighbourhood I stayed in. So the guys knew that I boxed and how good I did at it. And the guys that would jump on me wouldn't jump on me no more." Michael suffered at first due to Leon's reputation, and he told Earl Gutsky of the Los Angeles Times, "Leon would get into fights all over the projects and win. But me, I became the target. Guys Leon had beaten up, they'd put together gangs and come looking for me to get even. It was always, 'Hey, you were Leon's brother?' and then pow." But soon, Leon's new status in North St. Louis eventually served as Michael's inspiration, and he said in an interview with Robert Seltzer of the Philadelphia Inquirer, "I adored Leon. I just wanted to be like him. He was boxing as an amateur before I got into it, and he was knocking out everyone around. He was gaining a lot of respect in the neighbourhood." Although Leon now had the respect and reputation in the projects as a tough guy, he was not very attentive when in school, and he struggled like many students in an all-black school which had limited funding. His former bully and classmate John Crittenden said he was not a bright guy at all. We had 7th and 8th grade together, and he was way below the level of an 8th grade. I can remember him writing his name on the blackboard, and he had the E in Leon backwards.
Well, Principal Cozy Marks, who received those letters from Kay Spinks, acknowledged that Leon might have been a bit slow, but I never noticed dyspraxia or anything. He had learned about life in the community where he was from, had to be the tough guy and that sort of thing. He had a discipline problem with one of the teachers. The problem was disrespect. Leon spoke out of turn, or he didn't respond the way the teacher thought he should have. One thing that was in my favour was that I was taller than Leon and I had about 30 pounds over him. He was on the verge of being suspended more than once. He had a hard time following directions, maybe because of the lack of concentration. No teachers, it seemed, were able to find a way to motivate him. Case Spinks was often called to the principal's office due to Leon's behaviour, and according to Marks, she never blamed the institution or the school for her son's troubles. She would say, "I know my boy doesn't always follow the rules. I try to make a good world for him at home, and you do the same here. But in between, we have to turn him over to the other world, the streets." When Leon was 19 years old, he decided to drop out of school and he enlisted in the Marines in 1973, even though many of his boxing friends thought he would fail. He wasn't good at anything else, so they thought he'd fail. Well, Leon not only left behind his family, the housing projects, but he also left behind his girlfriend, Zadie Mae Calvin, who was also the mother of his two children, Leon Jr. and Daryl. Leon was only 17 when he had his first child and would go on to have 3 children with Zadie. Their third would be Corey Spinks.
Leon was sent to Parris Island in South Carolina for a 12-week training camp, but ended up staying for much longer than he anticipated due to an incident very early into camp. Leon's friend and fellow Marine Roger Stafford said those drill instructors were terrible. They would do anything, beat you down, call you names, talk about your mother, your brother, your father. When they talked about Leon's mother, Leon knocked out 2 drill instructors. They put him in the hole, and he stayed there for like 3 months or longer. He was in Parris Island for 6 months until he was discharged. One popular story, perhaps fictional, places him later on with a group of privates at Camp Lehune when a gunnery sergeant walked out of a building and spit on the sidewalk. The sergeant hadn't looked where he was aiming, and his gob landed a little too close to Leon, who reportedly said, "How about an excuse me?" Now the story ended with a superior officer on the ground and Leon in hot water. Leon told Sports Illustrated's Pat Putnam, "I was a wise guy off the street. It was difficult for me to adjust to somebody telling me what to do and what not to do. So I fought it, but I learned. I straightened myself out because I learned it was not so bad to live the life of a Marine." When Leon was relocated to Jacksonville, North Carolina, at Camp Lehune, he met 2 established and well-respected coaches who run the All-Marine boxing team, Art Redden and John Davis. From the moment Leon walked in, they knew he was something special, and they knew they had a talent on their hands. After watching Leon on the heavy bag, they put him in the ring against the All-Marine champ.
Well, this is how that went. Within 30 seconds, the champ was on the canvas, left rendered by the troublemaking private from North St. Louis. From that moment on, Leon was moved from those brutal training regimes that he detested to the boxing team. He now did the road work in the morning, boxing in the afternoon, and represented the Marines in the ring when called upon. It was perfect for Leon. Boxing teammate Ron DeNicola remembered the positive influence that Art Redding had on Leon. He said Redding was able to marshal all of Leon's skills. Leon was a tough kid. The toughness on the Pruitt Iago never left him. He was a ferocious fighter. He was born to be a fighter. He loved the ring. Redding was about the same size as Leon, and he knew how a big man should fight. He was a good technician, delivering punches from one end to the other, and Leon was extraordinarily good at cutting angles on a dime and in throwing combinations. For Leon, Redding was that right guy at the right time. He was a critical part of Leon's transition to the big time. Years later, even Leon Spinks admitted himself that it was indeed the Marines boxing team that molded him into the fighter that he become when he told boxingtalk.com, "I'm a boxer puncher, steady puncher. I don't stop. Most guys fight for a little while and then stop and hug each other. But the military taught me to punch all the time and stay busy." Amongst the excellent Marine boxing team, it was Leon who became the leader and guy to look up to, a complete contrast to the kid who was being bullied and mugged regularly on the housing projects. Tony Santana was a kid from the Brooklyn projects, and he actually became Leon's roommate. And he recalled years later when they boxed together, and this is what he said.
Tony said everybody wanted to be like Leon. He had the character and the heart and the attitude that a boxer needed. Leon took me under his wing. He came to my corner every time I fought, and he always invited me to go running with him. He talked to all the team members and always kept them up. We had the best boxing team, and Leon gave us that. He was the leader of the team. Another teammate, Buster Drayton, remembers how much of an influence Leon had in the Marines boxing team when he joined, and he said, when I signed up to join the team, the guy said you can't make the team unless Leon approves it. You have to box Leon, and if he wants you to stay, you can stay. And I said, what? And they said, that's the way it is. So he approved me. He's the one who said I could make the team. Although he was respected and clearly talented, Leon never abided by the same rules as everyone else. He would paint the town red in the evenings, which included a few drinks, a bit of smoke, and plenty of women. But he was never pulled up due to his talent. When at Camp Lehune, he could usually be found on Court Street hanging out on the Strip, a civilian wasteland of abandoned buildings, strip clubs, pawn shops, tattoo parlours and bars. Even when he never made the initial weigh-ins, he would skip rope to boil himself down to light heavyweight and win. He would always win. When the team travelled to the other states, his antics would continue, and Tony Santana recalled, every time we went to another state, the first thing he'd do, he'd take off. When he came back, he knew all the spots, the people, where everything was at. He would find the clubs, meet a woman, and then he would take us.
The establishments Leon liked to visit when in Court Street were Shaw's Cafe and the Bunkhouse, where Alma Gibson actually worked behind the bar, and she said that Leon was one of my favourite people. He used to hang around with one of my girlfriends who was very, very into drugs. She was actually doing heroin. I can't say that he was, but he was always with her. He used to get drunk and he'd dance, and a couple of occasions I'm almost certain the cops took into consideration that he was on the Marine boxing team and they let him slide with plenty of stuff. Now, the sheriff on Onslow County, North Carolina, a guy called Ed Brown, remembers that in those days they had marijuana, PCP, mescaline and LSD. Drugs were not the only thing that was being misused. Racial segregation was also another issue of this time and in this area. One night, Leon and his pal, Roger Stafford, they actually went for a bite to eat. But because they were black, the food took a very long time to arrive. So they left. They left the place. You know, we're not going to wait around for any longer than I need to. Well, the waiter, what did he do? He calls the police, tells them they refuse to pay. Within minutes, 3 local white policemen pulled over the 2 Marines. They ordered Stafford to pay for his hot dog, which he ordered. And he recalled in his own words, we were off the base, and those were Jacksonville police officers. But Leon didn't care. Stafford tried to stop the scene from escalating, telling Leon, come on, Leon, don't worry about it. Leave it, Leon. Come on, Leon, let's go. But it was too late. Leon got to fighting. He was knocking them down. He was so strong. It took all 3 police, and they still couldn't handcuff Leon. He was something else with his hands. He kept on fighting. I was screaming, no, stop, please, Leon, stop. But he wouldn't stop, and they put him in a paddy wagon.
When the police found out he was a member of the Marines, they would let him go without charge. But when Art Redden found out, he would dish out his own punishment. But by the sound of Stafford's story, this plan backfired. The coach made Leon spar with everybody on the team, starting with the lightest fighter, 106 pounds, all the way up to heavyweight. And it was supposed to tire Leon out. But Leon was so ferocious that he wouldn't get tired. He held nothing back. It was crazy. The little guy, he ran and ran around the ring to get away from Leon. When I got in the ring with him, I said, oh God. He sparred with me like he was trying to kill me. And I said, Leon, I was with you. It didn't make no difference. He fought everybody as if they were an opponent. I was jabbing him and moving around the ring, practically running, and he was chasing me down, swinging like a wild man as he swung a left hook. I screamed, Coach, Coach! Everybody got whooped that day. Now, as an amateur, Leon went 178-7 with 133 knockouts and picked up another nickname, the Wild Bull of Camp Lejeune, and collected nearly every boxing title the military had to offer. Leon told BoxingTalk.com, I was in the gym, and when I heard my brother won the National Golden Gloves, I said, what's better than that? And they said, the AAU, The Amateur Athletic Union. So I won the AAU. Leon would won the AAU Light Heavyweight Championship 3 times in 1974, 75 and 76. He also won an Inter-Services title, a bronze medal at the World Games in Cuba, and a silver medal at the Pan American Games.
According to a Marine legend, Thomas Boswell of the Washington Post, the only thing Leon lost in the military ring was his smile. This is obviously something we'll know with Leon. Supposedly, his 2 front teeth came loose during a fight with army boxer Tommy Johnson. But this story has been discounted, revised, refuted by virtually everybody involved in this. Even Leon himself comes out of a couple of stories. In an interview with Ed Pope of the Miami Herald, Leon himself gave an alternative story. He claimed he had lost 1 tooth in a sparring session and a second in a boxing match, both while in the Marines. A third, he said, was later pulled out by the dentist. But Leon's account has many doubters, including Alan Richmond of the Boston Globe, who reported that at least one of Leon's teeth was extracted when Leon's wife, Nova, who we'll come on to in a little while, sat on Leon's chest as her son pulled it out with a string. Most evidence, including reports from those who knew Leon best, seems to point to Leon losing his front teeth as a young child. Luther Boyle, Leon's childhood friend, says Michael and Leon had the same smile, but Leon didn't have any teeth. I don't remember Leon ever having any front teeth. Tony Santana remembers Leon showing up at Camp Lejeune with a gap in his smile. According to Santana, Leon would plug the hole by sucking his thumb right before a fight and when we travelled. Gap tooth or not, I mean, there was another one as well where apparently he said some guy headbutted him and that's how he lost his tooth. So, yeah, it's loads of different stories. But gap tooth or not, the one thing about Leon loved the ladies. And there was one woman that he liked more than the rest. Noble Bush, her name was, who would later change her name to Nova. They met over the phone during Christmas of 1973. And Leon told Jet magazine that we cursed each other for about 10 minutes. We started laughing. We actually started going together over the telephone. They finally met face to face in the spring, and their relationship, let's just say, blossomed from there.
Nova went on to write a book called The Spinks Jinx, and although this is a darker side of boxing episode and we should just stick to the dark elements of Leon's story, we just must take this extract from her book. It's their first sexual encounter, and quite simply, it's funny. So Nova goes on to explain that her and Leon were having a romantic night in with a few drinks, and they decide to take things to the bedroom. And this is where we will let Nova explain. And she wrote, "He reached and grabbed me and said, 'Woman, you are the sweetest, warmest, softest thing I've ever run across, and you're cute too. I know this is going to be deep.' I looked at Leon because the last remark made me nervous. I pulled away and walked across the room to sit on my bed. It felt like I was in the principal's office waiting for my turn. I lifted my glass and began to sip from it. I watched Leon walk across the floor by the window, through the moonlight, which caught him just right. I could not believe what I had seen. Leon had the biggest penis that I had ever seen, and that's still true. Long, thick, and massive. I choked on the wine. Leon was now on the bed, patting my back. When I stopped choking, he began kissing me. Now, we don't need to go any further, as you kind of get the general gist of where this goes next. However, we must read just one last bit from Nova's description. We were making love, passionate love. Leon had started whispering something again and again. I strained to hear what he was saying. And he was saying, 'She can cook too.' Now, of course, if you want to read more, then please do go and get her book from Amazon.
Oh, wow. The fact that she choked on her wine gets me. Oh, my God, the fucking size of that. Jesus Christ. Leon has got a huge dick by the sounds of things, but good on him. Fantastic. Sorry, guys. Yeah, I mean, dark side of boxing, but wow, look, I mean, you can't hear that shit. You got to put that in, ain't you? Right, moving on. So the book isn't all like the 50 Shades of Grey, and it is Also informative about her dealings with the downs, the lies, and the devastation from the many women he cheated on her with. Plus, more on Michael, manager's attorneys, and her triumph of overcoming the size of his third leg. So Leon and Nova, going back to these two, so they got married on May 21st, 1974, and they moved into a housing complex on the Marine base with Charles, Nova's 6-year-old son from a previous relationship. Now, in March of 1976, Leon fighting as a light heavyweight and Michael as a middleweight, they arrived at the Olympic trials in Cincinnati, Ohio. They were among 88 boxers competing for the 11 spots on the United States team. Now, Leon knocked out 3 before taking a tight decision against a guy called John Davis in the final. Michael also cruised through, and they were on the verge of becoming the first pair of brothers to make the US Olympic team since the trials began in 1904. Now, Rolly Swartz, a retired Army major, who many actually credit for bringing through that talent, that crop of talent the US had, and when he told the United Press International that Leon had some personal discipline weaknesses at our Olympic training camp. Michael was the first up in the morning doing road work and the last out at the gym at night, but not Leon. He was the type of fella you had to push and push hard. We were continually on Leon to get himself ready. And according to Charles Mooney, Leon's behaviour almost got him kicked out of the team. Team coach Pat Nappy was going to send him home, but there was a big discussion about that because it was the first time 2 brothers had been to the Olympics together, so that didn't happen.
While preparing for the box-off, the fighters all shared dorms, and Leon's antics couldn't be ignored. Howard Davis remembered, there were definitely some destructive behaviour on Leon's part that didn't fit in with boxing. You can't drink, you can't party, or shouldn't, because it's bound to catch up. I can't remember anyone else on the team doing it. Leon loved to fight, but he didn't enjoy the rigours of training. One night he came in around 1 or 2 and I asked him where he'd come from, and he said, I was at a discotheque. It was incredible. I don't know how he could muster up the strength to fight, but he was one of those rare individuals that had the I don't care attitude. I'm going to fight no matter what. I truly believe if you put him in a cage to fight a lion, he would actually fight that lion. Leo Randolph recalled, even after he did all that partying, you couldn't tell when he got in the ring. It was a whole different person that came about. That killer instinct that they say develops in a boxer, he had it. He'd get into the ring and just start wailing on the guy. Leon won his box-off more convincingly against John Davis, and while Michael lost his first, he recovered to win the second and book his place on the plane alongside his big brother. The rest of the 1976 team consisted of light flyweight Lewis Curtis, flyweight Leo Randolph, bantamweight Charles Mooney, featherweight Davey Armstrong, lightweight Howard Davis, light welterweight Sugar Ray Leonard, welterweight Clint Jackson, light middleweight Chuck Walker, and heavyweight John Tate. When the Montreal Olympic Games arrived, the Americans were still considered too inexperienced, but they proved the doubters wrong. Out of 11, 6 Americans, Randolph, Mooney, Howard Davis, Ray Leonard, and Leon and Michael, had reached the finals, giving the US the best boxing team it had had since 1904.
You can catch all this stuff on YouTube as well. Some great footage. But Howard Cosell was the boxing commentator during the Olympics, and he was the man obviously banging the drum for all these amazing kids with incredible backstories. His producer at the Olympics was Terry Jastrow, who recalled the love that he had for the Spinks brothers specifically. And he said, Howard, above all else, was a champion of the underdog. And so he loved the Spinks brothers. He even loved to say their name. I believe when he says this, he's remonstrating that Spinks, the way he sort of says the SP. Michael and Leon Spinks. I'm not going to try and do Cassell's voice. I wish I could. He loved their backstory. Michael and Leon were shy, not particularly intelligent or articulate, but there was a soulfulness about them. There was a humanity about them. They were the kind of athletes that Howard loved. This whole idea of them coming from where they came from in St. Louis and what they had to encounter and what they had to overcome to make the Olympic team. Cassell praised the wild bull of Camp Lejeune and spoke often of Kay Spinks, who wanted to see her Olympic sons become preachers, apparently. Now, due to Cassell plugging all the backstories, a wealthy investor, wealthy person who wanted to remain anonymous, read the local St. Louis paper about Kay having to watch her sons on a borrowed television set, decided to pay for her trip to Montreal. The donor told James Rogel in the Post-Dispatch that I've played sports all my life, and so have my kids. I can't think of anything better than going to see my kid win an Olympic gold in the Olympics. So Kay was extremely grateful, said, God bless him. This is just like getting a diamond ring. I'm just so happy. I can't believe it. She'd never been on a plane before in her life. She was thrilled. Michael had won his gold medal before Leon fought. He was the last American to fight. And despite a spectacular performance throughout the games, Leon was actually a huge underdog against Sixto Soria.
Kenny Lower served as Leon and Michael's unofficial coach and paid his own way to get to Montreal, and he recalled, I was rubbing Leon down at 10 in the morning the day he fought in the finals, and he'd had enough alcohol coming out of his pores to knock me out. Charles Mooney knew that growl. He had heard it in an inter-services match when Leon absorbed a vicious punch that should have knocked him down, and he said, but Leon stepped back and cleared his nose and started to fight. That was his call sign. He would growl, and you better get out of the ring if he did. Howard Cosell was commentating on the Leon Spinks fight, and he said Soria is still punching and his hands are quick. You can see it. He's coming on. He's staggered and he's hurt Spinks. Spinks is without boxing skills. Remarkable to see the way the Cuban is coming back. What a fight. Don't talk to me about proficiency. Oh, the right, a sudden turn and punch. The right punch, Soria flush in the face, and down he went. George Foreman, ABC's co-colour commentator, said, Spinks isn't a boxer, but he's the best street fighter I've ever seen. Kenny Lower remembered this Cuban kid hit him, and he just growled. And he growled, and the kid hit him with his best shot, and Leon just kept coming at him. And he knocked this kid out. As Leon had vowed after losing the finals in the previous year's Pan American Games, if I have to die in the ring to win the gold medal, then I'll die. Teammate Leo Randolph recalled, oh man, it was phenomenal how he just dominated the fight. That Cuban guy was supposed to be one of the best in the world, and it was kind of comical how Leon did it. The adrenaline kicked in, the guy hit Leon, and Leon said, wait a minute, this isn't right, and he ran over to the guy and pounded on him.
Beautiful performance from Leon, and 5 of the 11 American boxing team won gold medals in Montreal. The other 6 were devastated, but the Spinks brothers were team players throughout, as Charles Mooney was the one who didn't get a gold medal, and he recalled that I was feeling real low. During the closing ceremonies, Leon and Michael swooped me up and we went to the coach's hotel. I did some crying and they popped me a beer and I cried some more, and then they cried. Then we laughed and joked. They consoled me and it was over. I'll never forget that. They took time out of their glory to make me feel better. Now, while Michael decided to obviously fly home back to St. Louis with his mum, well, Leon went celebrating. Trouble was, nobody knew where the hell he was. He has gone AWOL, as they say. According to the administrative officer at headquarters, company S.J. Stockhausen, my commanding officer, or the CO, told us to hurry up and make leave papers for Leon so we could pretend that he was on leave until we could find him. Then someone made the unbelievably dumb mistake of sending him unescorted up to Washington, D.C. to see the commandant of the Marine Corps, which was a General Louis H. Wilson. Now, when my CO found out, he started yelling, what idiot was in charge of this? Why would anybody let him try to find his own way to D.C., by the way? He was frolicking about someplace and not back at base, and we were extending leave papers, probably doing things that weren't exactly on the up and up, all to keep his name and the Marines' name untarnished. So they're trying to cover it up, the fact that he's disappeared. Well, he eventually resurfaced on August 4 in downtown St. Louis for the Michael and Leon Spinks Day, believe it or not. They had a Michael and Leon Spinks Day, where 2,000 people actually turned out to see their local sporting heroes. The city of St. Louis gave gifts to the Spinks family. Hamilton Jewelers presented Kay with a diamond ring, and local officials gave Michael and Leon the keys to the city. A grateful Michael addressed the crowd. He said, I want all you to know I appreciate this.
Leon said his bit like Leon only could, and he said, I really enjoyed coming back to St. Louis to see my buddies and my partners, to see what's happening. Well, what was happening for the next week, only Leon knew. He celebrated with unknown friends at an undisclosed location and finally arrived at Camp Lejeune by crashing his car into the welcome sign outside the base. Administrative officer Suzanne Wheatley said, "The rumour was that he was driving drunk, but I have no evidence of that. But that was what everyone was saying, and it was being hushed up." Now, instead of reprimanding him, the Marines rewarded him by throwing a party and milking every drop of public relations they could gain. First, Leon was handed a telegram from President Gerald Ford. Then he received a phone call from the Marine Commandant Wilson, who summoned him to the gymnasium. Leon was surprised by 3,000 people who cheered him as the brass band played St. Louis Blues. He walked into the ring wearing his Marine uniform and new gold medal. Then Private Leon was promoted to Corporal Spinks for his Olympic achievement. Even with the promotion, Leon still wanted out of the Marines, with only a year left of service, and so did those in higher places. The only one who wanted him to stay was his mum. And Suzanne Wheatley said, his mother was very much against him getting out of the corps. He used to use the phone on my desk to talk to his mother, and he'd plead with her to send us some kind of statement that she would like him out of the Marine Corps so that he could make more money and take care of her and his siblings. He was a gold medal boxer, but she was the only one that wore the pants in the family. He could barely get a word in edgeways. His only comments were, "But Mama."
In the end, there was a vote to decide on whether Leon met the requirements for an honourable discharge and they were allowed to leave the service early. In the end, they voted for him to be released. Wheatley confirmed that my superiors wanted to get him out before he became an embarrassment to the Marine Corps. Obviously, crashing the car into the into the signpost was probably a bad idea, but Leon can't drive to save his life. Leon was just as happy to be leaving as the Corps were to see him go. Now it was about earning money in the professional ranks. Leon signed a contract with Mildred Barnes, aka Mitt, the day after he won that gold medal. When he disappears, he's obviously on the piss and he goes to sign a contract. Barnes actually ran a small gym in the basement of the downtown railway, the YMCA hotel, and had let 16-year-old Leon, so back in the day, sleep over because he was tired of having to share a bed at home. So Barnes took him up on that, and Barnes gave him a bed, he gave him a key to the gym and some money in his pocket, which was enough for him to get 30% of Leon's earnings for a year. Unfortunately, what Leon didn't realise was that he still needed a promoter to get fights for him. That led him to signing a 3-year promotion deal with none other than Bob Arum of Top Rank. But it was the Vice President, Butch Lewis, who acquired Leon's signature and eventually got Michael's signature too later on down the line. Bob Arum said, "I knew Leon could turn pro right away. He had enormous talent. I didn't think as highly of Michael at the time, but some very astute boxing guys told me that in their opinion Michael was better than Leon at that point, that Michael had the real ability more so than Leon. It seemed like Michael was becoming a better fighter." Lewis then convinced a guy called Barry Frank, president of CBS Sports, to get Leon on air for his professional debut in Las Vegas on January 15, 1977. Now, everything seemed to be going really well, until Leon went off celebrating, and he never returned.
Bob Arum reckons he knew what he was like from the start, and he said, "I saw right away when we started promoting Leon as a professional what he was. Leon didn't have a mean bone in his body, but he was totally and completely irresponsible. I mean, he was almost childlike. He certainly wasn't a rocket scientist." Now, Butch Lewis had to track his newest signing down, and he spotted a small article in a local newspaper that said Leon had been given a traffic violation for driving with a suspended licence in Des Moines, Iowa. Lewis told Pat Putnam of Sports Illustrated, "Here it is, New Year's Eve, and I'm the only guy on a plane flying to Des Moines. I didn't know where Leon was in Des Moines. Hell, I wasn't even sure he was there." Lewis drove around the black areas and literally asked around for a recent Olympic gold medalist, and believe it or not, he received a tip-off that he was at a house. When Lewis knocked, lo and behold, there was Leon, who was worse for wear and had no intention of fighting Lightning Bob Smith. However, Lewis convinced him it would be an easy night's work. Lewis told Sports Illustrated, "Leon had only trained for 11 days and I was scared to death he was going to run out of gas." Leon, now fighting as a heavyweight, fortunately had enough in his tank to knock out Smith in 5. His next fight was in Liverpool, England, where he knocked out Peter Freeman with a right to the jaw midway through the first round. Boxing writer Ron Oliver reported on the Freeman fight in Boxing News and said, "Leon can sure punch, but he wasn't around long enough to show if he can box too." 2 weeks later, he knocked out Jerry McIntyre, also in the first round.
So for his fourth professional fight, Leon took on a hometown fight against the toughest opponent to date, which was Pedro Agosto. Now, with Kay and Michael watching from ringside, Leon traded blows with Agosto and sent him crashing to the canvas in the first round. Straight up, Agosto hung on the ropes and then struggled to his knees, but then it was over. It was 2-5. It was all over. Referee counted him out. The following month, Leon scored another stoppage against Bruce Scott in 3 rounds, and after 5 professional fights in 4 months, he was now 5-0 with 5 KOs. Getting all beautiful at the minute for Leon. According to Butch Lewis, Leon was also richer by $65,000. Give or take, he said. Take a few. So with that money, well, you talk about Leon, opportunity, money, more nights out, more drinking, more smoking, dancing, plenty of women. And Lewis must have been close to keeling over with worry, as he just constantly chased him around all the clubs, the strip clubs, wherever else he was going, the bars. Michael tried to help Lewis, and he said to Pat Putnam of Sports Illustrated that, "I saw Butch needed me to get on to Leon. I was the key. Leon did a lot of running off on his own. I'd get Leon back and he would talk, we'd argue, and then he'll be okay. Most of the time, it was very confusing to us. Everything was moving so much. We never were allowed the time together we needed to get our heads straight. As each fight took place, I noticed a lot of shaky things happening. Like we discovered friends of Butch's selling Spinks t-shirts at one fight. When we asked about the royalties, nobody knew where the money was going. Leon was upset. There was a lot of neglect, a lot of disinterest. We were looking good to the world, but going nowhere. And he was having family problems with Nova as well. He was having so many problems, my heart went out to him."
Michael continued to say, "You can't lay too many things on Leon at one time. So I went home and talked it over with Mama, and she tried to call Leon. She told me she tried to call him through the Top Rank office in New York a lot, and that she got turned away a lot. In Leon's 6th fight, he could only muster up a draw against the mediocre Scott Ledoux, taking his career record to 5-0-1. The fact that the world heavyweight champion Muhammad Ali would even consider fighting a 6-fight novice in Leon Spinks defied logic and rationale. Yet at the age of 24, Leon, who was barely even a heavyweight and was outweighed by 27 pounds, managed to get the unthinkable opportunity. Initially, Ali thought the match was a crazy idea, telling Butch Lewis, "I can't fight this kid, it would make me the laughingstock of the world." Then Ali saw the pitch, a fight with a gold medalist, a ghetto kid who was being tipped for stardom. It was unbelievable, but the stars had aligned for Leon. However, first, he had to get past the Italian heavyweight Alfio Righetti on November the 18th, 1977. 2 months before Ali had defended his world title against the hard-hitting Ernie Shavers by a 15-round decision, Leon beat Righetti by decision, and in his memoir, My View from the Corner, Angelo Dundee recalled spotting Leon at 5 o'clock on the morning of the Agosto fight, and he said, "I caught Leon getting out of a cab, kissing his lady friend of the evening, or morning, or whenever, and then taking a swig out of a bottle. No glass. Mind you, that would have wasted a step. Just straight out of the bottle. That night he went into the ring and cold cocked his opponent Pedro Agosto in 1 round. Now that's tough."
There you go. I mean, this space of the Righetti fight and the Agosto fight, you're talking months. It's insane. It's crazy how fast this is going from gold medal to now the potential of fighting Ali, which he's got. And Lewis later recalled, as in Butch Lewis, in Thomas Hauser's Muhammad Ali, His Life and Times, Leon beat Righetti in a 10-round decision. They both looked awful. But I figured Leon, if he trained right, would be respectable against Ali, because Ali was slipping. He was slipping a lot, but come on. He's slipping, but you're talking about a novice. Leon's mother was skeptical about the whole thing and warned her son, "You're small potatoes compared with Ali. You're crazy, Leon. You'll get wiped out." Well, the WBA and the WBC eventually sanctioned Ali's fight against Leon Spinks on December 1st, 1977. But what the WBC said was that the winner had to fight Ken Norton, who had previously defeated Jimmy Young in an elimination bout. So Leon trained at the Catskills and followed his usual training routine of hard work in the gym, but even harder partying. Michael joined him in camp to lift his spirits, but there was little he could do to keep his older brother from going away for party. So Bob Arrow actually again says that Leon was a problem right from the very beginning because he was so undisciplined. We started making fights for Leon and he would get drunk before the fights. So we knew that he didn't have a very long life as a top heavyweight because of how he was abusing himself. Now, Sam Solomon was Leon's 62-year-old trainer who had worked with the likes of Sonny Liston, Ernie Terrell, and for a short time, even Muhammad Ali. And he actually told Sports Illustrated's Pat Putnam, to get Leon to the gym, I have to wake him at noon to get him there for free. For road work, I've got to get him up at 5 to get him running by 8. He has no conception of time. And sleep, man, does that boy sleep. He'll fall asleep just sitting on the edge of the bed with his head in his hands. Or he'll walk in circles for a while and then sit down and fall asleep.
Solomon continued to say, when he goes to the bathroom and he doesn't come out after a while, you know he's fallen asleep. But when he does get awake, there's no stopping him. Out all night, loves to dance, jumping from one thing to another. Even when he trains, he goes overboard. You can't get him to quit. Solomon told reporters that Spinks used to retire to his room, lock the door and crank up the music. Then he'd jump from the second-story window and make his way out for a good time, even during the worst winters. Solomon used to follow the footprints in the snow to locate Leon. Even though the local bartenders were advised to withdraw their services, it was not uncommon for other fighters starting their early road work to see Leon staggering back through the snow in the early morning. Roger Stafford, Leon's Marine Corps mate, remembers that nobody was able to stop Leon. Alcohol, marijuana, cocaine, you name it, Leon did it. And according to Stafford, Leon indulged right up until the bell rang against Ali, and he said, I was the only one besides his brother that knew what Leon would do. But not even Michael could hold him back. I tried to keep him in line before the fight against Ali. These pimps in Las Vegas had these houses and lots of girls and a lot of drugs. They told Leon they were having a get-together and they invited him. I pleaded with him not to go. Leon couldn't pass the drugs by, and he said, if you ain't going with me, I'm going by myself. So I had to go with him to watch out for him, to watch that they wouldn't steal nothing from him. And Leon got tore up. He was so intoxicated, and this was 2 days before he fought Muhammad Ali.
Wow, Stafford continued that he didn't get hooked up with the women. All he was thinking about was getting drunk and full of drugs. I was just sitting there watching him, and they were fixing drugs on him. It was early in the morning when we got back to the Hilton. It was time for us to put on our sweats and run. Leon was in the best shape of his life. This guy could run, I swear. He was an animal. That's what they called him. Butch Lewis called him Leon the Lion. All the stories surrounding Leon's exploits prior to the Muhammad Ali fight continued, and as Ali was actually leaving the hotel to do his road work at 4 a.m, Leon was coming back from an all-nighter. And according to Ali's business manager, Gene Kilroy, he was actually dressed to the nines, right down to his Playboy alligator shoes. Leon called out, "Hey, Muhammad Ali, heavyweight champion of the world." Ali just ignored him. And instead of hitting the road for his workout, he actually went to the coffee shop. And he turned to Kilroy and he said, "What am I doing here? I'm the heavyweight champion of the world. This kid's nothing." Ali's purse was still a handsome $3.1 million, and Spinks received $320,000 for the fight. That was actually aired on CBS, drew more than 70 million viewers and a sellout crowd of 5,298. Spinks was the 10-1 underdog, but the bookies were refusing to actually take betting lines on him at one point. So when the bell rang, Leon Spinks, who was still high from the party before that started at the Pruitt Igo, ran to the center of the ring and met the greatest of all time in the ring. I mean, it's incredible. Pat Putnam of Sports Illustrated summed up the fight best. So in the early fight, Ali gave away rounds with reckless generosity, clowning, dancing, contemptuously refusing to punch, as he was so often did before.
Putnam continued to say, when pressed by Spinks, he would go into the rope-a-dope that had worked so well against George Foreman and Ken Norton, and had to some extent against Ernie Shavers. Spinks' counter-strategy was stunningly executed. One of the weapons he had feared most was Ali's jab. To enfeeble the jab, Spinks pounded Ali on the shoulders and biceps whenever the champion went into his shell. He also drove occasional uppercuts between Ali's forearms, snapping his head back. By the late rounds, Ali's jab was more push than punishing, and Spinks was able to walk right through it. By the 11th round, Ali had all but abandoned the rope-a-dope, and he said later, I kept waiting for him to run out of gas, but he never did. I figured I had better stop waiting. Seeing his title slipping away, he fought Spinks in the 11th and 12th rounds at his own game, head to head, and he took both rounds, and late in the 12th, Ali thought he saw what he'd been waiting for, Spinks beginning to fade. With less than 20 seconds to go in the round, Ali double jabbed up and down and then hooked Spinks to the head. Spinks appeared hurt. Quickly, Ali moved in for the kill, but his opponent was not the groggy victim of fights past. Instead, Spinks belted him twice to the head. The bell sounded. For a moment, Ali stood, watching as Spinks walked strongly and confidently back to his corner. Ali's shoulders seemed to sag. Solomon could be heard shouting at Leon, "You're doing it, baby! You're doing it! But I want you to keep that left hand going." Then, while holding an unmarked brown bottle, he told Leon to spit out his water, so I can give you some juice. Now, nobody will ever know for certain what was in that bottle, although it could have been nothing illegal.
Well, Leon's teammates and the De Soto suspected that it might have been honey water, a mix of sugar water and mint used by Kenny Loa to relax the fighters' stomachs during the fight. Veteran trainer Emmanuel Strud watched the fight and he had no idea what was in the bottle, although he had heard of cornermen juicing their fighters with a homebrew of orange juice, honey and cocaine. Years after the fight, Milt Bailey, the legendary cutman who actually worked Leon's corner that night, admitted to mixing some concoctions for his fighter, one of which was a mixture of ammonia, water and peppermint schnapps. We've heard this before, haven't we, Sean? Now, while the exact contents of the bottle remain a mystery, there's no doubt that Leon's punches in the 13th and 14th actually regained the effectiveness that he'd been missing in the middle rounds, as he threw sharp combinations and took the fight to Ali. Pat Putnam again described that final round. He said in round 15, Ali was reborn in desperation, willing his body to be young. He went out looking for the knockout he knew he needed. As they crossed, Ali said something to Spinks. Spinks nodded, and they both threw savage big punches. No more artistry, no more defense. Grunting, they put this one in the trenches, and that is a very entertaining round. That last round, Putnam actually wrote that, shaking his head, Ali staggered back to the crowd in his corner. There he waited the decision. Now, the decision was all three official judges and the Associated Press scored the last 3 rounds for Spinks, but the AP had Ali winning 1-4-3, 1-4-2. So it was tight going into those last 3 rounds. However, none of that mattered because Judge Art Lurie scored it 1-4-3 to 1-4-2 for Ali. But Judge Lou Tabbitt scored the fight 1-4-5, 140, and Harold Buck scored it 1-4-4, 1-4-1, both to the new heavyweight champion of the world, and that was Leon Spinks. He became the first challenger to win the world heavyweight title on a decision since Jim Braddock defeated Max Baer in 1935.
Leon also became the most inexperienced boxer to ever win the world heavyweight title. While both fighters were in the centre of the ring, Ali said to Leon, "You upset the world tonight," and Leon replied, "Just like you used to. Thanks for the shot." Spinks then went on to say, "I was very serious during the fight, but I also had a lot of fun. He kept saying things to me, trying to make me mad, but all he did was make me laugh. It was like he was telling me jokes. One time he called me a dirty name and I said, 'Oh, Ali, how could you say such a thing?' Can you imagine your idol calling you a dirty name?" Ali was complimentary towards the new champion and said, "I gave the best I could. I knew he was a good fighter. It was a close fight. He was the aggressor. It could have gone either way. Next time, I'll have to get on my toes to beat him. My rope-a-dope didn't work. He was too strong. It was more a mistake in strategy. Winning the championship 2 times is rough. Only me and Floyd Patterson have done it. If I can win it a 3rd time, I think I'll establish a record that won't be broken in 1,000 years. He then said, I let him rob my house while I was out to lunch. Angelo Dundee said, I knew it was too close for comfort. I told him to stop fooling around. He was giving up too many rounds. But I heard the decision and I thought, well, what are you going to do? That's it. I prepared myself for this day for a long time. I conditioned myself for it. I was young with him, and now I feel old with him.
Well, this is a very poignant moment in Leon's life. So Leon went to the ex-champ's dressing room after the fight. He kissed him on the cheek and told him, good fight. He then told the press back in his hotel, I'm the latest, but he's the greatest. One sports columnist wrote that Leon arrived in Vegas alone, but he left surrounded by smiling thieves. Michael was painfully aware of the predators that had immediately descended on his brother. Years later, he would recall how the bad things started the minute the fight ended. On March 18, 1978, the WBC stripped Leon Spinks and awarded the title to Ken Norton. However, Spinks remained the WBA and the lineal world heavyweight champion. We have mentioned this before in previous episodes, mainly in our legendary night with Norton Holmes. Arnie versus Spinks was actually named the 1978 Fight of the Year by The Ring, and the 15th round was named the Round of the Year by the magazine. Leon, well, he was now in the spotlight in an amazingly short space of time after dethroning the greatest, but he was not cut from the same cloth as the great man. He was just an inarticulate kid from the projects who had little guidance, an eye for the ladies, and a taste now for cocaine. His decision-making was terrible. Within days of winning the title, Leon had assembled an entourage of people he didn't even know. His payroll included 2 press agents, 4 trainers, 3 lawyers, a manager, an accountant, a valet, a personal physician, 2 promoters, a sparring partner, and a 247-pound bodyguard with a shaved head named Lawrence Terud, who preferred to call himself Mr. T. Yep, the Mr. T, who would later go on to be a TV personality famously in the A-Team. So this is what made Mr. T. Leon spent $45,000 on a white 6-door Lincoln Continental limousine, complete with color TV, bar, phone, and stereo. $18,000 on a Cadillac Seville to go along with the 2.5-carat diamond ring he had given to Nova, $75,000 on a house in Detroit for his mum and Nova, and an undisclosed sum for a house in Des Moines for his mother-in-law.
Certainly splashing out the cash when he won that world title, wasn't he? Well, he kitted himself out in a new wardrobe that included a pair of black and white mink coats, each with a matching mink hat. He looked more like a pimp than the heavyweight champion, but the extortion from the people around him was off the hook. And Emmanuel Stewart said in 2011, Leon moved across the street from where I live in Detroit. He hooked up with Ed Bell, a flamboyant lawyer, and so Bell enticed him to move to Detroit where he could have more control over him. So Leon gets a beautiful house in a neighbourhood called Rosedale Park, and a friend of mine invites me to go there for a party. I open up the door. It was just to say it was off the hook, and that was an understatement. They were doing some kind of train, everybody going through the whole house. Leon and his cowboy hat on, and a couple of guys are yelling, come on coach, get on. So I get on with them, and I see a football player from Pittsburgh, and he's got a game the next day. It was unbelievable. That was the first time I got to see Leon personally. The whole house was rocking. When he would have parties, everybody's house on the block would be moving. You'd call him and tell him to turn the music down, and he'd ask, is it loud? You've got to remember where he came from, the projects. He got started there early, and it became a part of his genetic makeup. Smoking weed, drinking beer. Some people outgrow it and are able to control it. He never was able to control it. He never did feel comfortable in a nice environment. He's comfortable in a ghetto, low-income type place. He has a low image of himself.
Well, Ali's biographer, Thomas Hauser, actually said this on Leon. He said, Leon didn't know any better. He doesn't really understand how society thinks of as the responsibilities that come with being the heavyweight champion of the world. Even if he understood those responsibilities, I'm not sure that he had the personal resources to carry them out. In an interview with Washington Post in 1978, Bob Arum grilled Leon. Like the piece of shit he is, as we always know, that's what he does. He's just an arsehole, in my opinion. This is what he said. He said, disrespectful product of a ghetto environment. He has all these ghetto speech patterns and there's a lack of discipline about him. He sleeps late. He's not too concerned with keeping appointments. He's not all that quick when he talks. Whites are uneasy with him, and so are middle class blacks. They look at him, the champion, and all they see is a ghetto black that they've learned to shun, to fear. I mean, it just annoys me. Bob Arum gets a kid to this situation straight away, just criticises him. On July 1978, Leon told Bruce Newman of Sports Illustrated that people may be disappointed because I'm not Ali, but times change and the world changes. Now I'm the champion. People want the heavyweight champion to fit a certain image, and they're afraid I'm nothing but a dumb N, he says. But I'm just Leon. So Leon's behaviour in the next few months kissed away any endorsement deals that Butch Lewis had in the pipeline. I think he had it with Pepsi, 7-Up, all of them. Within 7 months after taking the world title, Leon was arrested 5 times. Now, the first is described by St. Louis Associated Press. So on March 19, 1978, an already bad weekend was climaxed early this morning for Leon Spinks when he was detained after being stopped by local traffic police here in his hometown. Earlier, Spinks had been stripped of his crown by the WBC and had been sued by the landlord in Philadelphia for non-payment of rent. Spinks, 24 years old, was charged with driving the wrong way on a one-way street and with operating a motor vehicle without a license.
The St. Louis Associated Press continued and said the police said Spinks had been detained briefly at police headquarters before posting bonds totaling $700. Sergeant Neil Kurlander, who ticketed Spinks, said the boxer had offered no resistance and that when he was arrested, Spinks had less than $20 in cash. Spinks declined comment to a reporter at police headquarters. Now in April he was arrested again in St. Louis, and the New York Times reported this time and said Leon Spinks, the heavyweight champion, was stopped in a parking lot of a fast food restaurant for driving with his lights off at 4 o'clock yesterday morning. He had no driver's licence. When police asked Leon for his driver's licence, Spinks replied, "Come on, you know who I am. I don't have one." The Washington Post reported Sergeant Francis Corona, one of yesterday's arresting officers, said that when he asked Spinks to get out of the car, the boxer tossed his hat onto the roof of the automobile. After questioning Spinks, Corona said the hat was handed back to Spinks, who tossed it onto the car's roof a second time. Corona said he examined the hat and found a small foil packet of white powder inside the headband. Spinks was arrested, and when he was searched, police said they found a marijuana cigarette and a bag of marijuana. Police said they found several packets of marijuana in the purse of Spinks' companion, Charlene Gunn. She was booked on suspicion of possession of marijuana and interfering with a police officer. Corona said Gunn cursed police when they arrested Spinks. He said, "You know the usual routine, if he was white you wouldn't be arresting him. If she hadn't have given us a hard time, I imagine we would have simply given Spinks a traffic summons and not even bothered to look in his hat. He certainly gave us no trouble."
Well, and analysts determined that the small foil packet of cocaine was the street value of, and drumroll, $1.50. I mean, are you fucking kidding me? Is it even worth arresting someone for? And that's with the marijuana together. I mean, that's just nothing. It's literally nothing. He was asked in St. Louis if he thought that he had been harassed, and Spinks said that no, not really. He was fine with it. Spinks then changed his tune when accompanied by an entourage that included attorneys and his first manager, Mitt Barnes, when they arrived in Miami after posting a $3,700 bond. He said his rights had been violated, and according to the United Press International, Spinks was asked about the cocaine allegedly found in the hat, and he responded, "I didn't have no cocaine or marijuana. I didn't know nothing was there." Questioned if he thought the charges were trumped up, he said, "Yeah, it's a frame. What do you think?" However, he said he would return to his court appearance on May the 5th. Now, Leon Spinks was actually pictured in handcuffs, which was plastered over all the front pages of every major newspaper after being arrested on traffic charges, not the drug charges, apparently. So the photograph actually resulted in some complaints as well. about the arrest procedures, and police said that it was just routine arrest procedure. Then Bob Arum was in New York. He got involved, and he said after conferring with Spinks' attorney, Ed Bell, it appears to be a case of illegal search and seizure, and we hope it is thrown out. Bob Arum was then quoted by news services as saying that this is the United States. A man is innocent until proven guilty. As far as I personally know, Leon does not use drugs. Yes, he does. That's just absurd. He's a marvelously conditioned athlete. There's something fishy going on. I mean, what was he saying about him? What? Talking a couple of weeks ago, talking about how he's some sort of, it's just, the guy's just an arsehole. Then on May 18, the Associated Press reported that a St. Louis Circuit Court grand jury refused today to indict Leon Spinks on 2 drug charges after hearing more than 2 hours of testimony from Leon Spinks, arresting officers and witnesses. Following the decision, Spinks appeared in Judge Oliver M. Collins's court and was fined $50. The court costs on charge of driving without a license as well. And Leon, well, he said that he now had a valid Michigan license, but I mean, I don't think he ever had a license.
Well, he never had a valid license. Just when you thought this would be a good time to get your head down and train, Spinks is arrested 2 months later in North Carolina for driving, yet again, without a license. 26 hours later, he's nicked again, this time for speeding. He had now become the victim of endless jokes by many in the showbiz world. Even Richard Pryor had a pop. Butch Lewis told Sports Illustrated's Calvin Fussman people would come up to Michael and make fun of Leon. Everybody had a Leon Spinks joke. Michael would want to punch those people in the mouth. He was confused. He wasn't sure if that's what happened when you become a champion or if Leon was bringing it on himself. Michael met with sports writer Jerry Eisenberg in Detroit soon after Leon's victory and voiced his concerns about his brother. According to Eisenberg, Michael said he was going to have a few fights and then stop fighting. He said, "I have to go with Leon. Leon has some problems," which I took to mean he was retarded. And I said, "You mean you're going to put your career on hold?" And he said, "Yeah, well, I want to be with him. I want to take care of him and make sure he gets his money, you know. I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I can count, and Leon can't." Leon was asked years later about the mistakes he made during this time, and he said, "I made a lot of them." Asked to name just 3 off the top of his head, he said, driving without a licence, getting married, and not looking both ways, and driving the wrong way down a one-way street. Now, on top of all the arrests, Leon also now had managerial issues, so getting the rematch against Ali had become more difficult.
Bob Arum, Butch Lewis said Leon was their boy, while Mick Barnes claimed he was Leon's manager and accused Arum and Lewis of trying to steal his fighter. Nova Spinks told People, I'm guessing that's the People magazine, in May 1978, "From the moment Leon won the championship, it's been hell. Have you ever seen 2 or 3 dogs pulling on a rag? Well, Leon's the rag." And that's pretty accurate, to be fair. Arum then produced a signed contract that proved Top Rank had control of Leon's first 3 title defences and an option on the next 3. Of course, the Ali rematch would only be for the WBA because, obviously, as we mentioned, WBC was stripped from him. It gave to Ken Norton, which caused even more of a rift between Bob Arum and Don King. Norton being a King fighter, Arum obviously with Leon and Ali. Arum offered Leon and Ali $5 million each for the rematch, predicting that the fight would be TV's highest rated event. This agreement, of course, pissed off King because he wanted to get the fight, and he actually said to the Washington Post, so this is Don King, "Arum is one of the most devious and evil individuals I've ever met, who builds a success road on deviousness." King then called Leon a totally illiterate black man. His illiteracy is an indictment against the school system of black ghettos of the big cities of the United States. The teachers that passed Leon Spinks in the 11th grade, well, they should be tied to a post and flogged. Throughout this entire mess, and even after the rematch with Ali had been set for September 15, 1978 in New Orleans, Leon was still being Leon, as many have quoted. That's what we always hear, Leon just being Leon. A training camp was actually set up for him in June, but he showed up 3 weeks late. Then after just 8 days in camp on July 1st, Leon closed camp to have a birthday party. I mean, that sounds great, doesn't it? A birthday party. Why not close camp for a day? Well, the festives last through to his actual birthday, which was 10 days later. So he had a birthday 10-day blowout, basically, where he drank, danced, and obviously smoked cigarettes and probably done a bit of coke and all.
Leon then went AWOL, not once, but twice. Both times he was tracked down by a member of his large entourage. The second time, Lester Hudson found him in Detroit. Leon hadn't slept in 3 days. Cocaine had become his closest friend now. Mr. T actually wrote in his autobiography, Mr. T, the man with the gold, he'd wake up and snort it. He had long fingernails and he would put it under his nails. The more cocaine he snorted, the less he trained. And the less he trained, the more out of shape he got. Leon was trying so hard to make friends with the ghetto dwellers. He would buy people drinks, share his smoke, and blow with them, then ride them around with him. They would eat his food, drink his drinks, sleep in his hotel rooms, snort his cocaine, and still try and rob and steal from him. Even Leo's ghetto friends said, he's a damn fool, using all those drugs and not training. They had lost respect for Leon, and his name was Mud. Leon told Bruce Newman of Sports Illustrated, I'm a ghetto nigger. People shouldn't forget that about me. You can take the nigger out of the ghetto, but you can't take the ghetto out of the nigger. One of the great things about Ali was the things he did for the black man in the white society. But you don't never see no Ali down the ghetto. I go to the neighbourhoods and give those people a chance to see the heavyweight champion of the world on their own ground. Mike Tyson, who was a teenager beginning his journey into boxing at the time, could relate to Leon, and he said, when Leon had all his money and he was champion, he wants to go back and show everybody. He wants to share it with these guys. This is what I got. Look at me. Ain't I bad? Didn't I make it? I'm the champ of the world.
Yeah, and Tyson continued by saying, I always liked Leon because Leon was a street guy. He dressed like a street guy. Yo, just look at his hat. His hat was fly. He always had a sharp hat, always getting into trouble like we were. Trouble was that the people he was hanging with were taking him for a ride, and those that really wanted to help Leon were Michael, pretty much only Michael and Kay, to be fair, maybe some of his closest friends and maybe one of his oldest coaches. Everyone else argued about who was the man or the woman in charge. What would be interesting is who would be by his side after the rematch. Well, Butch Lewis estimated that Leon knew only 10 of his 61 freeloaders who he had paid plane fare for and footed the bill for their hotel stays, which came to an estimated $7,000 a night. When he arrived at the airport, a police escort was ready to take the champion's $45,000 limo to the Hilton. However, before the convoy even left the airport, one of the police motorcycles, they drove into the back of his limo. Well, Leon, he jumped out and exchanged angry words with the officer until he was told to calm down and get back in the car. But according to Mr. T, when Leon got back into the limo, he said, all right, give it here, which meant that he wanted a spliff. That's what he'd say. All right, give it here, and then give him a joint. Leon was in the car with his closest friends, and Mr. T was one of them at the time, his bodyguard and an ally, a friend of his. And he wrote in his autobiography as well, he said, it was funny. Leon was getting high and all those police cars were around us. Leon was smoking reefers and waving to the crowds of people who had lined the street waiting to see him. 2 days before the fight, Bob Arum actually bumped into Leon before breakfast one morning. And the heavyweight champion was, let's just say, was absolutely pissed as a fart. And Bob Arum said that, Leon, you're fighting Muhammad Ali in 3 days. Are you crazy? Apparently, Leon just mumbled, what's the matter? I just got in for some road work.
Yeah, not the same type of road work that you're expecting to hear there. A certain different type of road work. Well, by all accounts, Leon spent September the 14th, the day before the rematch, getting hammered on drink, weed, snorting coke, and basically fucking anything that moved. He somehow made it to the weigh-in and was only 4 pounds heavier than in their first fight. On the day of the fight, he brought an unknown man and 4 ladies into his hotel room and locked the door. Mr. T recalled knocking on the door at 5:15 p.m. and found him drinking beer and snorting cocaine. Then Leon disappeared again. An hour before Leon was due to be in the Louisiana Superdome ring, Nova found her husband in a hotel room, laid out in bed, drunk with a woman. She should have left him. But instead, she dragged him to his dressing room where his cornerman Solomon, George Benton and Michael Spinks had been waiting for hours. In fact, even Howard Cosell, who was doing the live commentary, admitted that the fight was delayed because Leon had lost his robe. When cameras went into the dressing room to get some shots of the champ getting his hands wrapped, he was missing. Sports Illustrated's Pat Putnam recorded the chaos in the dressing room when Leon finally arrived and asked for his protective cup. Solomon said to Chet Cummins, a public relations man for Top Rank, "Go get a cup. For God's sake, get Leon a cup." "A cup," said Cummins, who then turned to Vicky Blaine, another Top Rank employee, and said, "Go get a cup for Leon for ice." Solomon yelled, "Not that kind of cup. A cup. For God's sake, a cup. Leon waited as the assistant ran to another dressing room and returned with Mike Rossman's cup, which he had just worn in a grueling 13-round fight. There were no complaints from Leon, although you can't help but wonder if it was big enough for him. And then Kay Spinks led the room in a prayer, asking the Lord to bring victory to the better man.
I bet that fucking stunk as well. I don't want to know what that smelled like.
I don't think he was too bothered at this point.
I think he... No. So Leon kissed a small cross and put it in his right sock, and then he walked out to the ring with his enlarged entourage as a crowd of 70,000 rhythmically chanted Muhammad Ali's name. Now, the Ali Spinks rematch was one of the most anticipated fights in boxing history as well, which actually took a record of 6 million and drew the second largest television audience in history, 90 million viewers. That was obviously back then. But wow, I mean, Bob Arum weren't wrong, to be fair to him, although he's an arsehole. The fight was not good to watch as well. It's just not a good fight. Ali was showing some of his old tricks, popping off his impressive jab. Even then, he still had it, backpedaling and clinching when he needed to, but it was much slower. This just wasn't, he shouldn't have been in the ring even then. Yet, lucky for Muhammad Ali, Leon was half the man he was from the first fight, but his corner was all, and it was all over the place. This is just the descriptions here. It's crazy. It was decided that due to the power struggle with the team, Solomon would speak to Leon in the first round. George Benton, who had come into it, obviously spoke to him in the second, and then Michael after the third, and then so on. They would exchange again. And well, George Benton, he told the Washington Post, he said, "I got up one round. I think it was in the third when I saw Leon doing nothing. Then I went up to the next round to try and tell him something, but everybody was talking from all angles. I just couldn't get in a word in edgeways. And fact is, one guy's telling the fighter to shake and boogie and wiggle, stuff like that. I still don't know what wiggle meant. At one point, one of the commissioners jumped up and said he was going to fine us for having too many men in the corner. I mean, it was just absolute chaos. After the fifth, Benton, he decided he had enough. He left the corner, showered off, and left the building. He literally just left before the fight was even finished. The whole debacle was just a complete sham, and Leon was looking more exhausted than the older and much slower Muhammad Ali.
Mr. T described what he saw that night when he wrote, "As the fight wore on, Leon grew weary. His eyes were all glazed, and he didn't even know where he was. He was just fighting out of instinct. His mind and reflexes were gone. Sam and Michael were hollering at Leon when he sat in the corner, but he didn't hear them. He was in another world." The decision was a one-sided unanimous verdict to Ali, who became the only fighter to regain the world heavyweight title 3 times. At the post-fight press conference, Leon refused to accept that he threw the title away on coke, booze and whores, and he said, "Intoxicated? Never. I was in great physical shape. It's just that my mind wasn't in it. During the fight, there was so much stuff that went through my mind. I thought all I can do now is survive and keep the fight going. If Ali did win, I wasn't going to let him win by knockout. There's a lot on your mind when you're the heavyweight champion. Maybe it ruined me. Maybe I didn't know how to deal with it." That's the truth right there. And while we're on the subject of truth, here's what Bob Arum told the press the day after Leon lost. "You have seen, in my opinion, one of the greatest tragedies of boxing, of America, and of a human being. Some of it I gotta take blame for. Perhaps I was wrong to put the kid in a title shot when he wasn't ready. He obviously hadn't matured enough to accept the responsibility of being the heavyweight champion of the world. The message here is that a fighter has to have strong leadership instead of a lot of sharks hovering around, picking the bones. And for once, I actually agree with Mr. Bob Arum."
I do. He was one of the sharks. He picking the bones out of it. He picked him up and dropped him already. He's saying he's finished. He's only 24 years of age. He's just lost to Muhammad Ali after beating him once. There was he just threw him in the ring knowing all the shit that surrounded Leon to earn money, and he did that. So I was still I just don't like Bob, but yeah, he is right, absolutely. So after the fight, when Leon actually returned to the Hilton, his entourage now of 70 people, well, would you reckon they went? Well, they all disappeared, absolutely gone. Lou and Dan Duva were actually standing in front of the Hilton when Leon got out of his limo alone, his head down, his hands in his pockets. And Lou Duva actually told Sports Illustrated that it was the saddest thing I ever saw. Yes, but it didn't stop Leon from being Leon. In October, he was actually involved in an accident in his new Corvette in Ohio. And a week later, he ran it through a fence. In November, he was arrested for driving without a license. I mean, how's he got these cars? After an accident in Detroit. And in December, his car was found smashed into a tree. He needs to get a license. Just get a license, Leon. Leon was an absent father, just like his father, leaving his 3 children with his ex-girlfriend, Zadie, to live on the poverty line. He should have been helping more with those kids, at least buying them a new home. When he had all that money, he was paying everything for everybody else. Contributing to child maintenance would have been good as well. He didn't do that, then he did it and he stopped. Instead, Leon did what Leon does, and he just got smashed. And Mr. T wrote that he partied and partied, he drank and drank, he smoked and smoked. He snorted cocaine, and boy, did he get high. I mean, he would be so high that he would be foaming at the mouth, and he was a sight to behold. Since losing his heavyweight title, Leon had fallen down a pecking order, of course, in the rankings, and his second defeat came in the summer of 1979 in a disappointing performance against Jerry Coetzee in Monte Carlo. He actually hit the canvas 3 times in the first 2 minutes of the fight, and the fight was over before the bell rang for the second round. Bob Arum recalled that Leon parted away his training time before that fight and showed up 5 hours late for the press conference. Well, Leon rebounded and stopped Alfredo Evangelista in 5 rounds, but then could only muster up a draw against a guy called Eddie the Animal Lopez.
Leon then knocked out the unknown Kevin Isaac in 8 rounds and then signed with Don King, who matched him up with Bernardo Machado, the number 1 challenger. King put the fight on the Holmes Ali undercard, with the winner getting a shot at the world title. Leon almost blew his opportunity by nearly missing the previous day's weigh-in. Word began circulating that Leon's car had been parked illegally and was towed. When Leon finally entered the sports pavilion at Caesar's Palace and approached the scale, he was nearly a half hour late. He casually explained, "We couldn't find a parking place," and was let off the hook. He managed to turn his life around for a brief time when training under Del Williams and was in excellent shape. Leon won nearly every one of the first 8 rounds, and then in the 9th stunned his opponent with a left hook to the head. He followed with a flurry of blows, and when Machado didn't respond, referee Ferd Hernandez stopped the fight. Leon looked good, and he earned every penny of his $125,000 purse. Now only in his 15th professional fight, he'd be fighting for the world title for a 3rd time against Larry Holmes, who defeated Ali in a fight that should have never taken place. 3 months later, Leon was back in the papers. On January the 15th, 1981, he told Detroit police that he'd been hit on the head while leaving a bar. He claimed he hadn't seen his assailants, but woke up 5 miles away, naked, in the Crestwood Motel, minus $45,000 worth of clothes, jewellery, and his front teeth. Now, the false teeth were later found by police under the motel bed and were held as evidence, but would be returned to Spinks soon. He wakes up naked in a motel. He's got no teeth, no front teeth, because his false teeth have gone. They find him later, but he's minus all this money. It really does make you wonder, like, what happened that night? You genuinely would have loved to have known and been a fly on the wall.
Well, there's a couple of theories to this, Sean. So Al Lowe, who actually promoted and managed Leon in the mid-1980s, had a different story of what happened to what Leon said. He said he's been drinking at Spears Bar on Woodward, just north of 6 Mile. And next thing he knew, he was waking up in a motel without his stuff, including his gold teeth. But some eyewitnesses said he was drinking and playing pool at the Last Chance Bar on Woodward and 8 Mile, where he was known to hang out quite a bit, and left with one of the ladies who, quote unquote, worked there. So That's what his theory was. And Mr. T actually wrote in his autobiography, he said, Leon kept on partying until one night some bitch set him up. He got high in a hotel room in January 1981 and she stole jewelry, his mink coat, money and drugs. Mr. T declared that he lied and told police that he had been robbed coming home from the tavern. He said someone hit him on the back of the head and took his money and dragged him to the hotel where they took all of his clothes. I tell you, Leon couldn't even lie straight. I mean, it's crazy. This was the kind of shit that was the eventual nail in the coffin for Leon and Nova. And on February 17, 1981, probably the reason why he lied about it as well, because he was still with Nova. Well, it was actually Leon that filed for divorce. By the sounds of it, he was a bit scared of Nova as well. Nova's attorney requested that Leon paid a mortgage on their house, pay tuition for Nova's son, Charles, pick up the $5,000 of Nova's legal bills, and a very interesting thing, but also for Nova to acquire his teeth, which had gone missing. So the lawyer also asked for Nova's $375 weekly check to be bumped up to $500 should Leon take the title from Holmes. The divorce became final in 1982, but the bills went unpaid. But we do still think that apparently she got his teeth. So I don't know. Maybe she took the teeth. So the Holmes fight was a one-sided beating, absolute demolishing. It was awful. That it actually came to an end in the third round. There's a great story of Holmes as well. Apparently Leon was rude to Diane, his wife, and that's why he wanted to bash him up. At days, Leon was led back to his dressing room as the crowd obviously booed. They were disappointed with the performance.
When the door shut, Leon sat for a post-mortem. Nobody in the room would say it, but he'd probably just had his last shot at the big time. Michael Katz of the New York Times reported the following exchange between Leon and Del Williams. Leon said, "I'm not giving up. We've just got to go back to the drawing board. Right, Del?" "Yes," Williams said. "We've got to correct those mistakes." Williams agreed again, though it was unclear if Leon was trying to convince himself or Williams. After removing the reporters, the doors remained closed for more than an hour until Leon emerged. He got into a yellow limousine, swearing he'd get back to basics, train hard, and resurrect his career. Bullshit. A few days later, he was arrested for carrying an unregistered .357 Magnum in the glove compartment of his car. Now here's the article extract by the New York Times on this arrest, and it reads, "Spinks was behind the wheel of his Cadillac when police pulled him over at 2 a.m. today, that was June 19, 1981, on the northwest side of Detroit, a few miles from his home. They said he was driving with an expired license plate. As Spinks, the 27-year-old former WBA heavyweight champion, reached into his glove compartment for the car's registration, the police reported they spotted a .357 caliber Magnum handgun. He said he wasn't even aware the gun was in the car," said Sergeant Arthur Williams of the Detroit Police Department 12th Precinct, where Spinks was arrested. He said he didn't have any use for a gun. Spinks stood mute at his arraignment, and Judge Donald L. Hobson of Detroit's Recorder Court entered a plea of innocent. If convicted, Spinks could face a maximum 5-year prison term and a $2,500 fine. He was freed after paying a $1,000 personal bond, and a preliminary court examination was set for next Wednesday, a court spokesman said.
The New York Times report continued. It said the gun was not registered to Spinks, said Inspector David Patterson. Commander Sergeant Williams said the car Spinks was driving actually belonged to a corporation bearing the fighter's name. So we had a dealership somewhere. Spinks was also arrested in connection with a parking ticket that he had not been paid, obviously, and he was ticketed with an expired license plate. Well, that's nothing really come of that. He got his fine. That was about it. But so we're going back to the boxing. After taking a beating from Holmes, Leon actually moved to the cruiserweight division, an emerging weight class at the time, but was probably more of his natural weight as well. Without that, he was a small heavyweight. Before his second fight at cruiserweight, Leon gets sued in Detroit for $500,000. It was a lady called Doris Jones Rosemond. She suffered injuries while in her cab, because the cab was actually struck by a car, as in Leon Spinks' car, which was speeding while he was drunk. Leon stopped the car of his Cadillac, jumped out and then verbally abused Doris after the accident, accusing her of malingering while she lay on the ground with neck, collarbone, and rib injuries, which legitimate injuries. So she's on the floor in pain, and he's telling her, "Get up, for fuck's sake. What's the matter? Nothing wrong with you." Well, the following month, Detroit police released a statement asking Leon to claim his teeth and his diamond watch as well, which apparently they still had. The watch with Leon Spinks' name on the back was found with other jewelry in a raid on July 16. So there you go. So they had his teeth and his watch. So he's still running around with no teeth, knocking women over. Leon did actually return to the ring, and he managed to capture the irrelevant North American Boxing Federation title in the cruiserweight division by scoring a decision over Jesse Burnett in October 1982. Now, to start the new year, Leon was actually traveling in a Mercedes-Benz. It was Michael's Mercedes-Benz and one of their other brothers as well at the time, when police signaled for them to stop. Well, Michael decided to ignore them and instead led the police into a 25-block police chase. When he finally stopped, he was arrested on an illegal weapons charge. Now, this is what the police said. They tried to stop Michael Spinks for running a red light, and he sped off through the streets of West Philadelphia. The United Press International reported that when Spinks was, as in this is Michael Spinks, was finally halted, police said a .45 caliber revolver and 6 spent cartridges were found on the floor of the car, and he was taken to the police station.
Michael said, "I was driving and I saw flashing red lights maybe 3 blocks behind me. I pulled over thinking it was an ambulance or something. They, as in the officers, didn't say anything to me. They just told me to get out of the car. When they searched the car, they found the gun. It wasn't loaded. I shot the gun off on New Year's Eve and left it wrapped up in a shirt on the floor and forgot about it. It was given to me at the 1976 Olympics in Montreal by a fan." Now, moving back to what Leon was doing around this time and that win he got over Jesse Burnett, that victory set him up against the Puerto Rican Carlos de Leon, where he actually suffered a beating at the hands of the younger, faster and more skilled de Leon. Following the humiliation, Leon Spinks retired and spent 2 years travelling with his brother Michael, who was happy that he had hanged up the gloves. He told the Ring magazine that he had tried desperately to talk Leon out of the fight, but that his mind was already made up. By 1984, Leon decided to approach local Detroit car dealer Sam LaFata and asked for a financial backing to help restart his career. LaFata took him to see his friend Emmanuel Stewart, and LaFata recalls, Leon was in desperate mode. He needed money and was very, very serious at the time. He said he wanted to get his life back. I took him over to the Kronk. Now, Stewart said this in 2011. I got involved as a co-manager. Leon was the roughest guy in the ring, the biggest 178-pounder I ever saw. He was an animal. I remember he was fighting a guy at the Olympic trials, all-army champ, and Leon was so strong that he made the guy almost run. He was so fucking tough that nobody could deal with it. I never saw anybody who could overpower everybody. That was the Leon I knew.
Well, LaFata and Stewart joined forces to back Leon, and LaFata, this is what he said. He said, Leon was a real long shot for me. I was doing him a favour, really. We might have signed a little contract at the time, but that was nothing. I never took anything from him. To be honest with you, I didn't see a future for him, but he gave him a chance. Now, his first 2 opponents were Lupe Guerrera and Rick Keller, who were poor opposition, and Leon rightly sent Guerrera to the canvas in the first and second rounds before flooring him for good in the fourth. And then obviously for the first time in Leon's career, Michael wasn't actually ringside for the fight. He actually told the New York Times, or Michael Katz in the New York Times, I'd rather see him be an exotic dancer than be abused in the ring. I couldn't take it. So Michael's just like, please don't fight no more, and he's continuing. 6 weeks later, on April the 9th, Leon did go on to stop Rick Keller in 2 rounds. And then in June, he won a unanimous decision over a guy called Tommy Thomas. By 1986, he had run through half a dozen promoters and even more managers. He was staying with his new girlfriend now, Betty Green, at her apartment in Detroit and scrapping by on $400 a week allowance fronted by the Kronk management team of Stewart and LaFata and Marv Hoot. His Rosedale Park home now belonged to the National Bank of Detroit. However, Thomas Hearns would later buy that in a cut rate of $55,000 to obviously pay off his debts. His last 5 fights had brought in $26,400. The 5th contest actually producing an 8-round stoppage over the unknown Vip Kane for the equally unknown WBC Continental America's Heavyweight Championship. So he's now moved back to the heavyweight division and then goes back down. So he's fighting at heavyweight and a sort of fighting at cruiserweight mainly, but he does dip in and out. But that victory over Kane was so meaningless that Leon actually had to vacate that title, and then he agreed to slim back down to cruiserweight and then fight Dwight Quarry for the WBA title. After losing to Michael, Quarry had stepped up to cruiserweight and won 6 fights and was eager to give Leon an absolute pounding.
Now, Quarry's manager, Rock Newman, said Butch tried to get him suspended from the sport, so by this time there was a lot of bad blood between Dwight and the Spinkses. Dwight didn't just want to beat Leon, he wanted to humiliate him. Now, the fight took place in Reno, Nevada on March 22nd, and the winner of the fight would defend the title in a big money match against the Olympic bronze medalist and rising cruiserweight Evander Holyfield. Less than a week before the bout, Leon filed for bankruptcy with no hope of paying the $301,303 due to various creditors. Leon now owed $85,000 to Don King Productions, $18,000 to Dee's Fur Works, $500 to Detroit Edison, and $500 to Michigan Consolidated. The case was closed 4 months later, and Leon was cleared of his debts. Now he just needed to get himself in shape and ready for his last chance at world title glory. But this is Leon Spinks we're talking about, not Michael. Now, Rock Newman was worried about Leon. That was until he witnessed a moment that put him at ease. And he learned, on Wednesday morning I go down at 5 because Dwight's going to have his last run of the training camp and I'm going to warm up the car. I see Leon and a couple of his friends walk into the hotel and I think, damn, he's already been out for a run. He's training hard. He didn't have jogging clothes on. It looked like he'd spent the night in the casino or something. Then he walked past me and he was reeking of alcohol. Absolutely reeking of alcohol. So then he sat down at the blackjack table and he was flirting with the dealer. He told her that he was Leon Spinks and she said, no, you're not. Leon Spinks doesn't have any teeth. And he turned around from the table and pulled his teeth out and grinned back at her with that big Leon grin and said, how do you like me now?
Leon. He really just got his massive, enormous willy out and just popped it on the blackjack table. I think that might have felt wrong. After seeing this, obviously, Rock Newman said that I was nervous about that fight because Dwight had so many things going on in his personal life and Leon still packed a heavy punch. But when I saw Leon drinking at the casino, I told Dwight, look, there's no way in the world Leon can go a whole bunch of rounds. I said, he'll come out and shoot his load, quite literally. And 75% of my nervousness just went away. Absolutely. William Knack of Sports Illustrated then wrote a piece on Leon before the weigh-in, who had to actually go in a sauna to try getting off the excess weight, obviously because he's up and down and just to make the weight. And this is what he said. He said, in the ashtray next to the hot tub, just lying there grinning, where the fighter's false teeth at one time the celebrated bridge in America outside of Brooklyn and the Golden Arch. Now Leon flashed his wonderful toothless smile like he did to that lady over in the blackjack table. The one that had prompted Muhammad Ali to call him a vampire as well, which we didn't go into, but yeah, he did. And was to become the emblem of Spinks's free-spirited freshness in a sport overrun by bums wearing bulletproof smirks and diamond pinky rings. Leon said, as if announcing some sort of personal record, I haven't had any sex for 2 months. I'm going to do my best to win. I'm not going to take any arse whooping. Then, the evening before the fight, Emmanuel Stewart and Lafata went to Leon's hotel room to check in on him. When they got there, Leon is laying on the bed naked and he had a lady friend with him. The place is littered with bottles of beer and containers of fried chicken. I mean, he's having a time of his life, really. This was a first for Emmanuel Stewart. He recollected that Leon looks at him and says to him, Coach, ain't what it looks like. And I said, it looks like you're having sex. It looks like you've been drinking. It looks like you're living like a gigolo. I had never in my life experienced a fighter that did this stuff. Even today, nobody tops Leon.
I can imagine Emmanuel Stewart walked in and seeing Leon Spinks cocked up like a broomstick and his supposedly large penis just flopping around everywhere. What a sight. An image that Emmanuel Stewart must have took to his grave with him, because I'm telling you now, that is one hell of an image. Well, Lafata remembered, I walked out when I saw the scene. It just bothered the heck out of me. You do so much to help him, and it just breaks your heart. I said, what the hell am I doing here? What am I wasting my time for? Before the fight, Kay said a prayer in the dressing room. Emmanuel Stewart never forgot the scene and said, before the fight, Mama's having a prayer about this young man who's been working so hard and put so much into it. And my assistant vice president, Prentice Bird, couldn't take it anymore. He just walked out. I gotta leave, he said. I can't hear this part. It was a horrible fight for Leon, who was beat down so bad that Stewart threw in the towel. And he said Dwight Cowie would get him over to the ropes and beat on him. Then he says to me, while hitting Leon, got any more of these guys over at the Kronk? I like beating on a big man with a little gold Kronk breeches on him. He's really rubbing it into me. By the 6th, Stewart had seen enough and spared Leon a further beating, forcing referee Mills Lane to put an official end to the fight. Years later, Stewart would recall, I hate losing a fight, but I stopped it. Leon came over to me and said, don't be so damn serious. Let's go and have a drink. I just had to laugh. That was typical of Leon. In his dressing room, Leon did his best to keep his career alive, and he asked a few people still with him, you still love me, don't you? The reply came, we still love you, Leon. But everyone knew that was his last chance. 3 months later, Leon was back in the news when the Nevada State Athletic Commission suspended him for testing positive for the depressant phenobarbital following the loss to Cowie. According to Leon, he'd taken the medication before the fight to alleviate stomach problems he'd developed after dropping 23 pounds to make weight.
Sitting in that sauna eating chicken and drinking beer and whatever else, it probably didn't help. The suspension, well, it was of no concern to Leon's handlers. Dad already moved on. Lafata and Stewart, they're gone. In the 2 years following Leon's loss to Dwight Quarry and his abrupt dismissal from the Kronk gym, Leon fought 9 times, losing 7. He even got involved in the New Japan Pro Wrestling program, but that was a bit of a disaster, complete disaster. On July 22nd, 1988, Leon married his longtime girlfriend, Betty Green. Michael paid for half the wedding, splitting it with Betty, and flew to Detroit for the celebration. For 3 days, the marriage went relatively smoothly. On the 4th day, Leon was served with papers claiming he and his ex-wife Nova owed $187,000 in back taxes. Things went downhill from there. Betty would be in and out of her job at the General Motors factory where she was working, and Leon would rarely be employed for more than a week or 2. He would actually spend his days in front of the television or sitting at a bar. He still made the occasional headlines by continuing to crash cars, obviously with still no license. Usually it was Betty's as well. But he had long since moved off the front pages. He was now newspaper copy about the one-time heavyweight champion had grown shorter and the incidents were just basically more pathetic, and his name was less and less relevant. He has just fallen into an absolute bliss. People that give him chances, no more. Leon's business manager, Al Lowe. Well, we got him to sign an autographs, compete in boxing events, and have a go at wrestling to bring in some much-needed dough. At one match, Lowe actually choreographed a scenario that culminated in Betty getting into the ring. So this is him going back to wrestling, kickboxing thing, and she was angrily swinging her purse at him, and it was all a stage conflict. Wasn't all that far from actually the truth. And Lowe actually remembered that I had many 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning calls, usually the result of partying and heavy drinking. Leon and Betty would be drink pretty good. I'd get a call from Betty, Leon's doing this, and then from Leon, Betty's trying to run me over with a car. One night I went over and Leon was on the porch and Betty had driven the car onto the lawn and she was asleep and Leon was passed out. Around this time, Leon was actually contacted by Charles Ham. So this was a plumber who had once actually trained him and Michael, and who still trained the neighbourhood kids out of the Northside Bombers Boxing Club in the area where they were brought up in. And he was now actually beginning to not only train Leon and Daryl and Corey Spinks, but he was also now stepped into the shadow that had been left behind by Leon Spinks himself.
Ham said, you would think they were my kids. I was around them so much. I was a father figure to them, so they didn't miss having a father too much. Daryl Spinks was full of praise to the man who stepped in for Leon, and he said Mr. Ham was a coach/father to me, Corey, and my brother Leon. He took care of me and would walk around with busted shoes, and he would buy me shoes. He would do everything. For a while, Mr. Ham didn't even know that Leon Spinks was our daddy, because we never did tell him. When he found out, he called my father and talked to him. My dad didn't know he was boxing. Corey was also fond of Ham, and he said, Charles Ham did so much for me. I love him to death. I looked up to him as being a dad. He's a terrific man. Now, Betty urged Leon to invite his 3 sons to Detroit for the summer. Sadie May agreed to let the 2 older boys go, but said that Corey, who wasn't yet 10, was too young. Daryl remembered. It was supposed to be 2 months, but it ended up being 1 month. My brother Leon didn't talk to my father. He stayed out of his way. He was angry. He says, we stay in the ghetto when we got a rich father. My brother never did forgive him. At one point during the visit, the 2 Leons went into the backyard for a sparring session, and the young Leon held his own. Later that day, the 2 got into it when the youngster asked his dad for money for gym shoes. The argument spilled outside, and Betty recalled, the next thing, I heard the glass break. I jumped up and ran to the porch to see what was going on. Big Leon had pushed Little Leon in the chest and he fell against the glass. Big Leon started saying, don't let that sparring session go to your head thinking you can whip my ass.
Well, their relationship was clearly strained and pretty much unrepairable. Leon was also able to see his father as well, to sort of rekindle some sort of relationship. He was actually dying of cancer. Obviously, their relationship was strained, but there is no doubt that Leon began to obviously understand his father and realised that he had pretty much become the same other than beating his kids. His new manager found him very frustrating, but at the same time, he just couldn't help but help him. How low this was, and he explained that managing Leon sometimes felt like a babysitting job than it did anything else. It was a daunting task, but it was one that you really wanted to do because you wanted to help him so much. Leon was a good guy with a good heart. Everyone says it. Most people do. It's now the late 80s, and a boxing manager, Jackie Callan, decides that she wanted to help Leon out any way she could. She convinced her dentist to replace Leon's missing front teeth for free and began working with Al Lowe to find Leon a steady job. Callan and Lowe approached a guy called Al Ballooney, the owner of Jova's restaurant in Detroit, suburb in Birmingham. So they thought Leon could make money simply by shaking hands and telling stories. And the former Tigers pitcher, Denny McClain, actually remembered that, everyone liked him. And he said that anybody could talk to Leon. He would sign autographs all night and he would tell the same stories every night, one after the other. I never heard him get mad. I never heard him wallow in self-pity. One night, Leon lost his teeth for a couple of hours and everyone in the place on their hands and knees trying to find the damn teeth, like looking for a contact lens. Eventually, I think he had fallen behind one of the bottles in the well, and when they went to use the bottle of liquor, they found the teeth there.
Well, Emmanuel Stewart again remembered stopping in one night and he said, I go in there, hey, look at that, it's Leon. What in the fuck are you doing? He's behind the bar all dressed up. So I ask for a Chardonnay and I get a glass filled to the rim. And I said, what's this? He said, go and enjoy yourself. Then he grabs another glass and says, that looks so good, I gotta have a fucking glass too. Now by the summer of the 1990, Leon's son, unfortunately, was shot to death as he was driving home in the early morning after visiting his girlfriend. The New York Times wrote, Leon Calvin, 19 years old, a light heavyweight boxer who had turned pro in June, was found dead at 5:30 a.m. today in his girlfriend's car on a bridge between East St. Louis and St. Louis, said Illinois Police State Sergeant Ken Wiltrout. The article continued to say, reports conflicted on whether Calvin was accompanied by other people in the car, but the fatal shots apparently came from outside the vehicle. Wiltrout said few of the details of the shooting were available. No motive had been established and no arrest had been made. Michael and Leon were now both retired. Mike, happily, but not Leon. After witnessing Buster Douglas defeat Mike Tyson in 1990, he was inspired to come out of retirement. Now living in Chicago with Betty, he managed to find a manager in Joel Calawart, a local business and real estate attorney who got a group of investors together to pay off Leon's debts and launch his comeback. On November 15, 1991, in Gary, Indiana, Leon was back against Lupe Guerrera and he knocked him out in 3 rounds. Leon then beat Andre Crowder, Rick Myers, Rocky Bentley and Jack Jackson, and seemingly was making this resurgence in his boxing career.
Well, in September 1992, 2 months after beating Jackson, Leon was matched against Kevin P. Porter at the Lansing Civic Center in Michigan. Now, Porter actually recalled seeing Leon at the weigh-in. He said Leon wasn't dressed too good. He had some wrinkled pants and an old sweater with his sleeves cut off it and a hole in his shoe. I really felt sorry for him. The shoe was worn out on one side and there was a big hole. I'm like, man, my God, former world heavyweight champion. I've been poor all my life. Money comes and money goes, but I don't think I've ever had a hole like that in my shoe. Well, the fight went 10 rounds and the 39-year-old Leon Spinks lost the decision. Rather than retire from the ring for good, as many of his close friends and family wanted him to do, he continued and he knocked out Kevin Poindexter in the first on December 11, 1992. Again, close friends and family argued to the authorities that Leon should not be given a license, a boxing license. That is, he definitely got a driver's license, and he was granted one to fight in 1993. His managers and promoters responded that Leon had passed every physical and neurological exam in the book and that he needed the money to survive. Jackie Callan, who watched on and considered Leon a friend, she said, Leon is an example of boxing when they use and abuse a fighter for his name, and he's not in any shape to be really fighting. You didn't have to be licensed physicist, psychologist or neurologist to know that this man should not be in the boxing ring. All they had to do was have him count backwards from 1 to 100 or ask him to do patty cake, baker's man. And they'd see that there was something just not quite right.
Now, Callaway agreed and left, but an ex-gambler from Boston, Charles Farrell, took over and put Leon in against Ed Curry. Farrell had the fight fixed in what was supposed to be an 8-rounder, but ended up being a scheduled 10. Curry battered Leon throughout, but was disqualified after not responding to the bell in the 9th. Next up was Shane Sutcliffe, who, according to Farrell, never wanted to willingly put Leon in with anybody that could punch back. But Leon took the fight and he lost an 8-round decision after another beating. John Carlo was next in 1994, and it was supposed to be a layup fight. Carlo even said, I figured I had nothing to lose. If I lost to Leon Spinks, who was an ex-world champ, it would be more of an honour just to fight him. This fight wasn't a fix, but it should have been, as Carlo described the disaster that occurred. I went out and jabbed and I noticed that he went to block it, so I faked the jab and threw a hook and it landed right on his jaw. It was so quick, he went down right away. I only threw 3 punches. Farrell admitted, if I had to do it again, I would have fixed the fight. I would not have missed that last step because I could have then put him in a fight where he wouldn't have gotten hurt, where he would have actually gotten paid. It might have helped his life a little bit. He was beyond being trained. He was beyond doing any real gym work. Leon got paid $1,500 for the Carlo fight and spent it before he'd even earned it. Farrell explained the depths of the despair that Leon had now found himself in.
So he said, after the Carlo fight, I'm sitting in the lobby of the hotel where Leon is staying and I'm taking care of some business. And Leon came up to us. He's a very shy person and he wanted to know if he could enter our space. We talked alone for a couple of minutes, and as he's leaving, he says, can I get some money? And I said, sure. What do you need? I'm thinking a couple of $100, maybe 500. And then he says, can I get $5 for a sandwich? He's always thinking about the present, Leon, even at this point. 8 months later, and Leon was back in the ring after some St. Louis attorney and boxing promoter Steve Frank arranged a fight at a country and western bar called the Little Bit of Texas against a guy called Ray Kipping. I mean, this is just ridiculous now. This is just not worth it. Frank added Leon's son, Darrell, as well to the undercard, but he was taken back by how the night unfolded, and he took his promoter friend Ray Sepulveda to Darrell's hotel to introduce him, to introduce the two before the fight. And well, this is Darrell, not Leon. This is Darrell. And Frank, this is what he recalled. He said, it's 4:30 and we're going to Darrell's room. The door was partially open. There's no answer, but we hear someone in there. So I push the door open and Darrell's having sex with a girl. I mean, slamming this girl. I said, Darrell, what the fuck are you doing? And he doesn't even break his stride. What's up, Steve? Ray Sepulveda's jaw is on the ground. He's like, what the hell? I say, Daryl, I want you to meet Ray. Then Ray says, excuse me if I don't want to shake your hand. It's awkward. So I say, is there anything I can get you? He orders a cheeseburger and he's still having sex. Then he talks to the girl if she wants to have anything herself and she says, yeah, order some fries.
Like father, like son. That is
Oh, wow.
absolutely hilarious. Well, things got a little bit worse for Frank when he said at 5 o'clock in the morning somebody called the state commission and said Leon's punch drunk. So Butch Wilkinson from the commission says, I'm told Leon can't fight. I said my brother, neurophysiologist Bennett Frank, examined him, so Wilkinson says we need a written statement notarized. But my brother was at my cousin's funeral, so we reached an agreement that the fight was shortened to 8 rounds and fought with 16-ounce gloves, sparring gloves essentially. Jackie Callan was disgusted and said they put him out there like a circus performer. She says, and I thought it was so cruel because if there's any doubt the man's over 40 years old, look at his record. He's been knocked out 9 or 10 times. For what reason? Your brother's the doctor. He approved it. The whole thing was shameful. Leon beat Kippen in a unanimous decision. Now, according to Marty Bickle, who judged the fight, it was a typical Leon maul and brawl fight, and the norm for somebody at the end of their career. Steve Frank paid Leon $5,000, the $2,500 purse plus an additional $2,500 in cash, and Frank said, I bet you that money was gone before I left the building. Leon would just give his money away. Now, 6 months later, on December the 4th, 1995, Frank promoted Leon's final bout, an 8-rounder, against Fred Hoop. Frank recalled the issues he had with Leon before this fight and said, I put him up at the Harley Hotel a few days before the fight. The area was foreign to Leon, and I knew that if I cut off the phone there was no way he would escape. At 4 o'clock, I went into his room. It smelled like marijuana, and he was drinking beer. I'm 99% sure that in both of the fights I promoted, Leon went into the ring messed up. He'd had something to drink, and I know that he was smoking.
Well, Leon lost by unanimous decision and ended his boxing career with a record of 26 wins, 14 by way of knockout, 3 draws and 17 defeats. Now, after Leon's last fight, his health deteriorated so badly that it became evident on neurological tests and in his demeanour itself. Betty Spinks explained his condition. She said Lee was dragging his leg, falling and getting lost. His father called and asked me if Lee had a stroke. I took him to the doctor and had tests done, and they said he had no stroke. They said he had memory loss. They said it's from boxing, but the alcohol is making it worse. Dementia is setting in. So my son and I bought boots to support his ankle. We couldn't even leave him home by himself. He had fallen through glass tables. He'd lose his keys. I mean, this is the only time now where I think Leon slows down because he has to. 2 years later, in 1997, while still married to Betty and living in an apartment in Chicago, Leon, now 43, returned to his old neighborhood in St. Louis. New York Daily News reporter Wayne Coffey found him living in a homeless shelter. Leon explained that he preferred to stay in St. Louis, telling Coffey that everybody in Chicago is too busy criticizing me for what I've been through and what I did. They tear you down about what you should have been. And for $4.75 an hour, Leon was sweeping the aisles of Kiel Auditorium, the downtown arena where he once stood as a returning Olympic hero. Jesse Davidson, Leon's boyhood pal, spotted him one day. He said, I saw him sweeping the floor. He looked at me and said, hey, Jesse, what's going on? I said, Leon, you made millions and you sweeping the floor? I had tears in my eyes when I saw that. It shocked me. I thought, damn, he's come a long way. Amazing. God can bring you up and bring you down, back down, if you don't do it right.
Leon struggled through daily life as dementia set in. His speech got worse and he walked with a limp. In the year 2000, while separated from Betty and doing autograph shows in Missouri, he met Brenda Glure. They fell in love and she moved him back to her hometown of Columbus, Nebraska. The small town loved Leon and the locals called him Champ. And despite his obvious physical and psychological troubles, Brenda managed to set him up with a series of odd jobs. He swept floors at the local YMCA, worked as a school bus monitor and unloaded trucks at McDonald's. In 2011, Leon and Brenda moved to Henderson, Nevada and got married in Vegas. Ken Norton and Ernie Shavers were also present at the small gathering, and he was even able to rekindle his relationship with his 2 sons, Daryl and Corey, who said this. of their dad. Our relationship is phenomenal. The old guy has stepped up to the plate. He's a terrific granddad to my daughter. This is Corey speaking. He never misses anything. He embraces her and plays with her. He sends her something if it's a birthday. He comes to my fights. He's around more. He's in my life. I feel so blessed to be Leon's son. Leon's accomplished so much. Some people will never accomplish that much in their lives. I praise him for doing that. Someday I want to train fighters and have my own gym and bring my father into it.
Well, and this is what Daryl said. Daryl said, now when my daddy comes to St. Louis, I'm the one he stays with. I mean, he stays in a hotel, but he likes to hang around me and my friends, and they show him so much love. In 2014, TMZ Sports ran an article with the heading, Leon Spinks KO'd by a chicken wing. It then went on to explain that boxing legend Leon Spinks was taken down after going a few rounds with some chicken wings. We broke the story, this is what the TMZ said. We broke the story that Spinks is currently hospitalized in Nevada, and now we've learned Leon's medical problems can be traced back to a chicken wing meal deal gone bad. So Leon's attorney tells us Spinks is known to his friends as the Chicken Wing King, and during a recent meal accidentally swallowed a bone which got stuck in his intestine. Spinks has undergone 2 surgical procedures so far, and with a 3rd scheduled. We're told Leon is conscious and on the mend. Get well soon, champ. That's what they put. Thankfully, he did make a full recovery. But then in 2019, Leon was diagnosed with prostate cancer, which had spread to his bladder, according to his family. He was hospitalized for several months, but returned home in Henderson, Nevada, where he continued treatment as an outpatient. 2 years later, on February the 5th, 2021, Leon passed away in Henderson, Nevada at the age of 67. And all I'm going to say is, boy, what a life Leon Spinks led.
What a life he led indeed. One hell of a life. What a hell of a story this was about Leon Spinks. And, you know, this is the darker side of boxing, so we couldn't be remiss without including some of those most hairy but comical moments throughout the course of his life. And, you know, we focused only little on the boxing career, because if we do a career profile on Leon, we'll go more into his boxing career. And I think it's widely known about Leon Spinks and what he did so early on in his career. The fact that he became champion just after, 7 fights in, and he becomes world heavyweight champion, beats the great Muhammad Ali. Yes, obviously he loses it in the rematch, and from really that moment onwards, like you said, it was a very poignant moment, because when he wins that title, he wins all that money, and all the issues that he was struggling with before fights were just being exaggerated because of the more money that he was involved with. But also that the people that were around him, the hangers-on, the people that were just there to take money from him, to steal from him, to just be there, you know, as people that wanted to get a free ride. Like, none of these people really truly appreciated him for what he was. And as he said in his own words about people trying to bring him down and what he could have done in the sport, he is one of them guys, isn't he? Where you feel like if he wouldn't have had the issues he had outside of the ring, Lord knows what he could have gone on to be in this sport. But I think it's the lasting legacy that he leaves in it for what he did. The fact that he beat Muhammad Ali in 7 fights, the fact that he was an Olympian, the fact that he won a medal at the Olympics. Them 2 things alone, some fighters will never ever achieve. And his son's right in saying what he said, because some fighters will never even get to that, ever. And in that short space of time, he was able to achieve it. But during the midst of all this, you've got all the parties, you've got all the naked moments where he's cocking his leg up and he's just literally ridiculously in some scenarios that you just can't help but laugh about. But it's so sad as well at the same time, because you just think to yourself, nobody was ever able to control what was going on. And like we always talk about, why couldn't have someone intervened? I don't think anyone could have intervened with Leon Spinks. Leon, as people said, was just being Leon, and you couldn't control him, you couldn't do anything to stop him doing these things. And it was a shame that everything that he was involved in led to really an untimely demise. To me, a lot of the issues arisen from the fact that he abused his body so much. And, you know, none of us can predict when Father Time comes calling, but he certainly came calling a little bit, maybe too soon, for Leon Spinks. But then some might say, well, he lived a hard, fast life, and was probably people are surprised that he lasted till the age of 67. But for me, I feel like a little bit of ecstasy and agony about this guy, and I use that phrase quite a lot. It's because I see the ecstasy of what he was and what he brought himself up out of, you know, the Pruitt Igoe project, to be able to be the world heavyweight champion and then to go so far from grace, sweeping floors in the local auditorium where he once stood as a medalist, is just really sad. It's just a sad state of affairs, and I've really enjoyed learning so much more about Leon and his life and his career and his moments, and, you know, the highs and the lows of what he brought to this sport, and it has been a pleasure. But all them moments, them dark moments throughout his life, it just makes you wonder, doesn't it? Like, where could things have gone for him?
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. Where could he have gone? He was, he just, every time he did concentrate on when he was really young and he really knuckled down, he produced fine performances. I mean, beating Muhammad Ali was a great achievement, but we've got to remember, I mean, that wasn't the Ali. For even then, he was slowing down. He weren't nowhere near the Ali we had seen previously, but even still, it was a great feat. That, I mean, that space of winning a gold medal, well, coming from Pruitt Igoe a state straight up is an achievement. To then win a gold medal, that there sometimes is enough, and then to within that short space of time in the 7th fight get the world heavyweight title is, and by beating the greatest of all time, is incredible, isn't it? I mean, what a huge, and then it was just from that point, it just went downhill and it just kept going. And the only time he stopped doing the craziness in his life was when eventually the punishment that he put on his body in the ring, as well as taking narcotics and drinking too much, eventually caught up with him very quick. And as you say, 67 is no age at all. I mean, it's awful. It really is a shit end for Leon, but can't help but laugh for some of these stories. I mean, the one thing I didn't know about Leon was that he was very well endowed. That is the one thing. I don't think. I mean, all the stuff that comes from this story, that the description from his wife just choking on her wine is just something that's just. I couldn't stop laughing. I was in hysterics, and I still even just hearing you read it out. I know it's nothing to do with Dark Side of Boxing, but you know, I think Freddie Mills has got some competition, put it that way. Look, I mean, the stories are endless and they're not funny. I mean, like, it effectively hurt a woman, and then nothing. I don't think he ever got. I think she might have tried to sue him for $1 million, and then eventually nothing come of that. The wolves, man, the wolves that are out for Leon, and he didn't understand it. I mean, they all said it. So many people said it. He just didn't have an understanding, did he, Sean? He was so young, thrown into it, and then. I mean, how's he supposed to learn? He didn't learn himself. I mean, the poor kid. He was a shit dad until later on in his life. But let's be honest. His dad hung him on a hook and slapped him with a cord. I mean, and ran the face. I mean, what a piece of shit he was. It's just so. The thing is with Leon is there's so much stuff there where you can't help but sort of feel bad for him, although he was a bit of a shit dad. And everyone says he was a nice guy. Look, he was always a nice guy. But I think that sums it up, Sean. He was just, everybody said it. It was just Leon being Leon. And I believe even in Michael Spinks' career profile, we may have even said that. I think Michael might have even said that about his brother then as well. Just Leon being Leon.
Yeah, I agree. It's a story that gives us so many different elements to it. You're not your stereotypical story on certain fighters, but there's just moments there where you rightly pointed out at the start of the episode, it feels very much like a Mitch Green episode from season 2. You feel the same sort of feelings. You know the guy is deep down, you know, there's good within this guy. He's a good person. He's just making poor choices, and he's a product of that difficult environment. But then people would look at Michael and say, well, he was the opposite. You know, he went on to live a completely different life, of course. But I think Leon, with his difficult upbringings, and obviously he was struggling with a lot of things as a youngster, and he had to make his own way. And I don't think there were many people there to be able to sort of help him in the way that he needed the help. Obviously his mother was there, his brother was there, and they tried to do things for him, but I mean in the sense that he wasn't the most of intelligent individuals as a human being, and I think that was one of his biggest flaws, and nobody could tell him what to do, and no matter how much people tried to guide him, they weren't able to do it. And it's just a man that was on a path of self-destruction all the way throughout his career. What was nice about the story was to hear how things came towards the end of his life, where things had been made up with his sons and he was able to be a great granddad. And that's the kind of the nice side of this story, is that he was able to do these things before his passing. He was able to make peace with the people he needed to make peace with, and it's nice to hear that. But the whole story surrounding him is just total darker side of boxing material, of moments in hotel rooms, losing his teeth, finding him behind the bed. Just it's absolutely ludicrous, and it's a hell of a story, and it's been thoroughly enjoyable to cover. And I hope you guys listening, I hope it's brought you some light-hearted moments, but also some serious moments, and an education on Leon Spinks, the Chicken Wing King. If you have enjoyed it, please let us know on social media at darker_side_pod on Twitter, or you can find us everywhere else at the BTR Boxing Podcast Network. That includes Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok as well. A big shout out to the patrons of this podcast as well. Thank you so much for supporting us separately. You've had early access to this episode. We hope you've enjoyed an ad-free early access version of the episode, and if you're not a patron and you're interested in becoming one, you can do so by checking us out at patreon.com/BTR Boxing Podcast, and on there you can get ad-free versions of all the episodes. You can get early access to series-based content like this. You can get patron-only content, exclusive series that we put out there as well. So please do go and check it out, and if there's any support that you can offer to us, we'd greatly appreciate it. I hope you've enjoyed this episode, number 4 of season 3, Leon Spinks, the Chicken Wing King.